And I will then ask Luke Urick to please call the Planning Commission to order, please, Luke.
Morning. Go ahead and call our Planning Commission meeting to order. It is 8:30 on the dot.
Thank you. Our first this is a joint meeting agenda, so it involves both the City Council as well as the Planning Commission. And we're here today to talk about the cultural district overlay. And so the first item on the agenda is the first reading and public hearing of ordinances for amendments to the following sections of Chapter 12, Planning and Development, Exhibit A, Zoning Ordinance, Article 3, Use Regulations, 1, Section 311, Cultural District Overlay Zone, 2, Section 313, Use Table, and Section 304, the Commercial District Intent Statements. And today, as usual, we have Aaron Vonay leading us in this conversation. Aaron, you are officially on.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to get to our slides real quickly, and thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Planning Commissioners and City Council, and thank you, citizens, for being here this morning to talk about the Cultural Overlay District Zone, as well as another item. So this here is the Cultural District expansion. Currently, we have a small area around the Fine Arts Museum of San Angelo that borders Oak Street, and right in that area. This would be an expansion that you can see on the red outline if you're able to see one of the monitors or if you have one of the maps in front of you. We'll start over on the west side where it starts at the bridge going across the North Concho River at Cohenheim, going south to Highland, which is 1 block south of Washington where the street light is on Washington. And then you're going to turn east, go all the way down Highland, all the way to Russ Street, which is right behind Fort Concho Elementary. Then you'll turn north, going up Russ Street to the railroad tracks where it goes under the railroad track overpass and turns into Allen Street. And then you see it turns back a little bit to the north there at the Rio Concho Hotel, back to the river, and then back down to Cohenheim. So you see this is also in District 3, Mr. Harry Thomas, and in District 5, Karen Hesse Smith. The borderline between those is Cohenheim going north. To the west is District 3, to the west is District 5, and to the east is District 3. Both neighborhoods also are represented by that break in the map of Fort Concho to the east and Santa Rita neighborhood to the west. Here is the zoning, which will become important through our discussion. Each one of the Planning Commission and City Council members should have one of these maps in front of you as well. So that will become important. You can see there's a lot of different colors in there, so a lot of different uses. And the Cultural District Overlay Zoning is a zoning primarily, and then we're bringing in a design district with it. And so it is to help clean up this zoning, to help revitalize the cultural area of our community. It is to help streamline and coordinate some zonings that work together more in harmony than some of our heavier uses. Our heavier uses don't naturally fit with some of our cultural uses in that area. So we'll come back to this slide a couple of times. So just be aware that this is an important piece that we have.
Would you go through each of those zonings and describe the CN versus the CO, all of that, so that publicly we're talking about what the zoning is currently?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm going to start with the residential. So the lightest color yellow, which is up here on Baker Street and by the railroad up to Bird Street, that is RS1. The only use there currently is single-family residential. RS2, if you look over here on the left side of the screen, there's kind of a large mass over there between Avenue A and Avenue D to an alleyway there between Cohenheim and just not quite to Irving. That is RS2, so it would allow single-family residential and two-family residential like duplexes. Or it doesn't have to be a duplex structure. It could be two different residences on that house, even if they're detached. The next zoning district that's residential is the orange. That's low-rise multifamily residential. That is a very flexible zoning district. It allows single-family, two-family, townhomes, twin homes, and then low-rise multifamily, so multiple structures per lot, more than two. The one thing that I'll mention about RM1 is those districts, that is where it starts to allow short-term rentals by right. RS1 and RS2, they are not allowed by right. They must have a conditional use for short-term rental. Now we'll move to some of the commercial and industrial uses. And so the blue on the map is light manufacturing. That's where you are actually manufacturing goods and wholesale items and sending them out, shipping them out. And as you can see with our railroad through there, that was a great idea in the past, but as we've moved on and our rail port continues to be built on the north portion of our town, less and less spots here need to be light manufacturing. And if we're also thinking about those heavy uses for a cultural overlay zoning, the lower the uses, the more congruent they are throughout the entire area. So you can see that kind of stripe through there that has the light blue. The next one I'll go to is the darker purple, which is CGCH. So that's general commercial, heavy commercial. In our 2003 and our 2000 zoning ordinance, at that time, the city council said we should be getting rid of those dual zonings. Our opportunity is now to get rid of that dual zoning by alleviating the heavy commercial. And so heavy commercial are items like, I guess the most common one would be vehicle repair shops that are repairing very heavy vehicles or selling of heavy truck sales. The vehicle repair shops are things that you would actually drop your vehicle off for. That's not like a brake or an oil change, but you drop your vehicle off for something that may stay there 2 or 3 days to be repaired. And so you can see along Irving, there's a major portion of that on either side, and then just on the other side of the railroad, along Chadburn Street, there is some areas there with CGCH. So those areas, we would take out the heavy commercial is our goal. Now, general commercial is a little bit lighter pink. There's not very much of that in there. There's a little spot over there where one of the banks is at, right along the river on the northwest side. General commercial is what we see in our along Sherwood Way, along Sunset, those areas that have our general retail stores, goods and services that people come and buy, not wholesale, that you come and purchase them for your family and take them back to your home and use them in different ways. Neighborhood commercial is a little bit lighter pink. It's very hard to tell in there, but a little bit lighter pink in there. And you can see between the Cohenheim and Abe Street, there's kind of a patch of different patchwork of colors in there. But neighborhood commercial are low use, low intensity, low square footage uses that also include retail sales and services. They would not include vape shops or tobacco stores, things like that, but they would allow for a small retail or a tax office or a photography studio or maybe an artist in residence that would be there in the neighborhood commercial. And then the OC is office commercial, and that again is like your tax offices, could be, in this case, over there's an engineering firm that they're an office and they come in and you do business at the office, things like that. The one item that you don't see anything of that we're changing to is allowing office warehouse. Office warehouse allows the warehousing of goods and shipping those goods to different places or keeping them there. But office warehouse also allows for things that we have always utilized them for, contractor yards, because you have a small office for the contractor, they do their business there, but then they have a warehouse or a yard that allows more outdoor storage. We're going to be allowing those, that type of use in this area. So that's the colors that we have there today. You notice the one thing I will mention is that there's a planned development over the fort. Our goal is actually with this is to remove that planned development and allow their type of developments by right so that they don't have to come and check in. They are a National Historic Site. They have very strict rules of what they can and can't do. They don't need another process for us to tell them what they can and can't do. We know what they're wanting to do. And this would alleviate one of their processes to go through on the city government side.
I'm going to stop for a minute. Is anyone on the Planning Commission now would be a time to ask about the current zoning that he just went through, if there's any concerns or issues or confusion about what current zoning is? I should say this, Luke, let me ask my counsel first, and then you go first, and then we'll go first. So open up the floor for any comments concerning the zoning right now.
Well, I think if you had any questions about zoning, you could pretty much cover every possible option in this area. So I think it does make a lot of sense to have some consistency. It's been developed over a very long period of time, and obviously things have changed with the use of the railroad and the types of uses along that area, as well as the single-family or residential areas that have been built out. So, I mean, I think if anybody has any questions about, more specifically on like the dual zoning that Aaron mentioned with CGCH or the light manufacturing, let's make sure that everybody's clear on what uses those involve and potentially what they could be used for. And that's, I think, the important thing to keep in mind too, is that if they're not currently being used for that, but they do have that more intense zoning, they could be used for that in the future. And so I think that's really the idea, in trying to align this area with the vision plan and to be sort of compatible with downtown and, driving more tourism. And, I think it's just important to understand what is available there today and what could be done, and, the effect that this would have on those areas. So, if you guys got any questions, I think now's a good time to pick Aaron's brain.
All right, I'm going to ask the same thing of council. Are there any questions about the existing zoning in any particular area here, or needs further clarification to understand the zoning? If so, let me know. No? All right, proceed.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, Larry, sorry, stop.
sir.
Larry.
Some of the questions I asked before the meeting, just clarification. Some folks considered this somewhat hasty, but essentially you've said that this has been decades.
Well, I think the city of San Angelo has wanted to protect this area and has identified this area through many plans, and I've got a slide on that, as being a culturally and heritage-specific area that we should be protecting. I know at least for over a decade, there have been discussions of how to do that the proper way. This committee that put together this plan has spent 11 months in process with multiple agencies and citizens, members of Planning Commission, members of City Council, to bring this plan forward. We've had 2 meetings at the Development Task Force with this discussion. We've had 2 town halls on this discussion, and we also had a brief discussion on this at a prior City Council meeting to bring it forward to today.
As I also mentioned at a call yesterday, suggesting that the area should have been moved southward from there.
Meaning creating a larger
Yes,
scope?
ma'am.
And what would that be?
I guess the question would be, outside of that red area, are there other heritage items, historical items, cultural items that we would need to be protecting in the neighborhood? I'm not sure today we would be able to expand what we are looking at based on our notifications. There might be the option if the groups concede of, all right, we could shrink it. I think that's allowable, but I don't think today we could expand it.
Thank you.
That expansion had been talked about some years ago, and at that point in time, people felt it was too big of a district and that we needed to tighten the borders, make it a little more concise, and so we've gone through that conversation before. Go ahead.
So next is our vision plan. Again, the yellow areas are kind of visioned to be residential. The purple areas are like a downtown area. The green areas are parks and open spaces. The blue area is civic, which is our Fort Concho area. And then you can see some of the commercial areas that are more red and pink. And then you have a small little industrial area that's down here on the bottom right. And the thought process when the comprehensive plan was done in 2003 is they thought along the river where the water treatment area is that might change over time. What we are learning today and other areas around town is that those areas are actually highly desirable for neighborhoods and continue to be neighborhoods, as well as that being right across from Fort Concho Elementary. And so doing the cultural district overlay zone in this area is compatible with the vision plan that was created in 2003, and as we move forward, we believe it will continue to stay compatible for this area. So here's our purpose for zoning ordinance of why we bring zonings forward. Promote beneficial and appropriate development of all land and most desirable use of land in accordance with a well-considered plan. Protect character and establish pattern of desired development in each area. Prevent or minimize land use incompatibilities and conflicts among different land uses. Maintain property values by stabilizing expectations and ensuring predictability in development. Establish process that effectively and fairly applies the regulations and standards of zoning ordinance and respects rights of property owners and interests of citizens.
Would you go back over those again?
Yes,
They're very
ma'am.
important. That's
They
the
are
key
very
to
important.
this.
These are in
So
our
I need
ordinance.
that to go slow,
Yes, ma'am.
very specific.
Very specific. So the first one, promote beneficial and appropriate development of all land and most desirable use of land in accordance with a well-considered plan. The second one is protect character and establish pattern of desirable development in each area. The third is prevent or minimize land use incompatibilities and conflicts among different land uses. 4 is maintain property values by stabilizing expectations and ensuring predictability in development. And 5, establish process that effectively and fairly applies regulations and standards of zoning ordinance and respects rights of property owners and interests of citizens. And so those do come directly from our zoning ordinance. They've been there since 2000, and that is the threshold that we make decisions on our zoning ordinance for our community.
Any questions? Any concerns from planning council?
I think, I'd just like to point out, number 3 in the zoning ordinance purpose, pretty poignant in this particular case. It is prevent or minimize land use incompatibilities and conflicts among different land uses. Obviously, when you have basically every form of zoning in one small area, there's constantly incompatibilities between the neighbors. And then secondly, I think it's also important to keep in mind, number 5, specifically to respect the rights of property owners and the interests of the citizen. I think that's what we just need to keep in mind as we go forward with deliberating this today.
Yeah.
I think it's important to repeat what Luke said, and that is to protect landowners' rights and to preserve as well. We have a tremendous asset called the Concho River in San Angelo. It's one of the greatest assets that separates us from many communities across the state of Texas. And everyone who visits San Angelo comments on how fabulous the Concho River is and the development north of the Concho River. And yet, if you cross the bridge and come to the south side of the Concho River, what you see is just a lot of stuff. There's no vision that's laid out. There's no concept that is obvious. And you don't want to look back and regret not making a decision to protect and preserve one of our greatest assets, and that is the Concho River. We need to be aware of the value of that and make sure that generations forward don't look at us and go, why didn't you do it? Why did you allow that? We can't go back. You can't go back. Once you allow it to happen, you can't go back. And so that's a key element here. We want to protect and preserve and make sure we understand the importance of our number one asset, and that's the Concho River and the lands north and south of the Concho River.
Yes, ma'am. So our purpose of this specific thing coming across is to prevent or minimize the land incompatibilities, maintain property value-wise by stabilizing expectations, ensuring predictability, and establishing that process that is effectively and fairly applies regulations and standards of zoning ordinance and respect rights of property owners and interests of citizens. And I'll say that last one is a balance, because you have individual property owners, and they may own multiple properties, but you're talking about maybe one, and then you have the citizens as a whole group, and what is it that our citizens need in our community? What are those things that they want to have in our community to make it a good, thriving community? And that is a balance to play when you're talking about zoning.
You want to talk about short-term rentals, which you brought up earlier, just to clarify?
So the proposal that we have today, and we can talk a little bit more in depth about some residential areas, would allow short-term rentals by right in the district. Now, if we choose to do something different in a couple of our residential areas, it would still restrict short-term rentals by right in those residential areas, that they would have to go and get a conditional use at Planning Commission. And the biggest thing, that they'd have to be 500 feet from another short-term rental. And one thing that will go back, and if you remember where Fort Concho Elementary is, it always has a 500-foot buffer around whether you're commercial, residential, but it has a 500-foot buffer around it for short-term rentals no matter what. And so that bottom southeast corner has got a 500-foot buffer around it for short-term rentals. So again, the timeline, again, all the way back in 1990, when I was a senior in high school, San Angelo was thinking about this. They did a river corridor master plan. I'm 52 today, so that's been a few days. 1992, the RUDAT, San Angelo connecting the past to the future. Very poignant sentence in there. San Angelo connecting the past to the future, and it called out these 4 items to happen, to make those connections across the river to our downtown, to our historic downtown. The San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts and Education Center, Celebration Bridge, Fort Concho, Santa Fe Railroad Depot. We also have the Paseo. We have the historic swimming pool structure. We also have the state's #1 welcome center in this area. And so those are all important things. It also came up again in our 2003 San Angelo Comprehensive Plan of how to make connections south of the river to downtown, as well as our updated strategic plan in 2009.
Did you point out the river stage? I might have missed that.
I did not, but you're
You
correct,
should,
Mayor.
yeah.
The river stage is also a key asset in that area that is so highly needed in our downtown to provide some entertainment districts and things like that. So again, we're trying to do the protection of heritage landmark spaces for all of our cultures, backgrounds, and community to share with the world for today and future generations. Create a zoning area with mixed use and infill capabilities while emphasizing civic pride through small business, housing, and community. Allows growth and regrowth in an area designated to celebrate history, cultures, art, and nature, which welcomes visitors while stimulating the neighborhood economy. We believe all of these things are part of this plan, is looking at small businesses, looking at our small neighborhood clusters in there, and how do we enhance them? How do we allow the arts and cultures to continue to celebrate our history and our heritage in these areas from all walks of life? We know that the Concho River has had humanity for thousands of years, and we have been a very important place in humanity for thousands of years, and we can't let that be missed, and we need to protect those areas. So the zoning, you can see the current zoning up there at the top. We went through all of those.
Which is kind of ridiculous, isn't it?
There's a lot of
That's like a
options
full page of
in
letters.
this area. So we're looking at bringing those down to allow general commercial, neighborhood commercial, office warehouse, office commercial, the RS1, RS2, RS3, RM1, and RM2, which is all the residential offerings we have. However, there is a thought to provide some higher protection for our residential, particularly the area that is RS2 and RS1. And I'll go between
Define
the
the
map.
difference between RS1 and RS2.
Yes, Mayor. The difference is RS1 is single-family residential. That's all that can be built there. No accessory dwelling units, no apartments, nothing like that. RS2 allows two-family. So you could have two structures, you could have a duplex, you could have an accessory dwelling unit. And I'm not sure if this will work on here, but right here, this area, Baker Street, this is RS1. And this area right here is RS2. Now you can see there's a little spot here that's RS2 and some pockets in through here that are RS2. If we are thinking that we would want to protect this neighborhood and this neighborhood right there, we could say we would not allow any commercial uses in those areas. I believe this area between Coneyheim and Abe, they've already got those commercial uses happening. So I don't know that we need to add another protection because those probably over the next 10 to 20 years will change to commercial entities over time. Here you have a lot of more heavy uses and some warehousing. I'm not sure that this little square is actually functioning as residential. It might be, but I'm not sure, although it's RS2, is it worth protecting a little bit further or not? But I can see, and we do have, I would say, some folks in the community that would like to protect these areas, and I'm just offering that as an option. I will go back to this slide. That the RS2 and RS1 zoned properties that we would allow no commercial development. They would still be within the cultural district overlay zone, but those properties that are zoned RS2 and RS1, we would say they couldn't have neighborhood commercial, general commercial, warehousing, anything like that.
So we're protecting homeowners.
That is, yes, that is an option. If that is an option y'all would like to take forward, that certainly can be an option of this, and we can write that in, that those areas, and we would add a couple of maps to make sure that we've got the right properties in there as we adopt the ordinance at the next meeting.
Yes, Tom, yes, Harry.
Since most of this cultural district is in District 3, I'm going to make a suggestion to the Planning Commission that they strongly look at this particular option when they consider this. I think there is enough people in the audience, many of them will probably come for public comment, that are concerned about the residential areas and being taken over by commercial entities. So from my perspective, I'd like to offer that as a strong option for the Planning Commission.
Talk to me about the protections for residential that's inclusive here.
So what would be inclusive here is that they would not be able to get commercial to move into those areas. They would stay residential. Again, the RS2 could still develop as two-family residential if they chose to. The RS1 would continue to develop as RS1 residential. In the future, if some of those property owners wanted to change their zoning, they would be able to be compatible with the cultural district overlay zone and change their zoning. It would not be spot zoning. Some of the downsides, and I'm not sure these are big downsides, but we don't have current zoning other than central business and the cultural district that we're looking to adopt that would allow a habitable structure by a resident and a commercial venture. So if you were maybe an artist in residence, you couldn't stay in the back of the residence and have a studio in the front. If you were a photographer, you couldn't use your yard as a photography studio and still live in the house. And so those were some of the things we were thinking of when we were doing this, but we also recognize that doesn't really cap what other commercial ventures could come in there. And so that's the challenge and the balance. And so maybe we're just not quite ready for that. And those that want to do that, they would find one of these properties that's outside of that area. They could still, we would allow residential living in a commercial structure. There may have to be some building code separation, but there's ways to do that. And then have the commercial entity at the front, the outdoor, the whatever it may be. We do that in our central business district. We're hoping to have more and more of that come through so that we can continue to have people in our downtown and our cultural areas throughout the week and on the weekends to help keep our community strong.
So if I want to cut hair, if if I choose to do that, I can't do that in the home that I live in.
Currently, no, that is not that's not an allowable home occupation at this time.
If I want to do somebody's income tax, since today's tax day, I'm not allowed to allow someone into my home to do their taxes.
That's correct. Under our current zoning ordinance, that's not allowed today.
And the proposal today does not allow for that
The
as
proposal,
it presented.
the proposal today would allow for that, except if we adopt the idea of the RS1 and the RS2.
I don't want any accepts. I want
Okay.
it black and white. What does it say?
Well, today, our proposal from staff and the committee is that the entire district would be cultural district and allow multiple uses. From Councilman Thomas's suggestion to Planning Commission is these areas here that we would roll back commercial, which means no filing your property, your taxes with somebody that lives there, not a photography studio, not an art studio, only residential.
But
And
doesn't Church Photography already have an office there in a building?
they're in this little pink area.
Tiny little area, right?
Yes,
there.
ma'am. I checked that. So there is these uses abutting residential now.
And have there been any complaints from those citizens that have residents right next to those businesses?
I did not check that specifically, so I don't know that I can give a confident answer on that. I know in this area over here, we have not received complaints in this area over here. That's between Cohenheim and Abe, which is a little higher traffic, higher intensity. But that's a good question. I just don't know that answer. I did not look into that.
Other question, Tom E. Tom E.
And I hope this isn't chasing a rabbit, but the thought just flew into my mind. We're currently in process of updating a housing study.
Yes.
You mentioned infill as a part of, does this, as to what's proposed, does it allow the flexibility depending upon, because this is coming for a final vote in 2 weeks. As proposed today, does this give the flexibility that might be needed in this area to do infill if appropriate in any of these areas?
There's already infill going on, Tommy, a lot of it. So where there's empty lots, there's a couple of builders who are picking up those lots and doing homes in that area. So the greatest growth in terms of new development in this district right now happens to be new residential housing.
So, yes, I would say that the as proposed, because we are proposing some development rules that would shrink the size of some lots, because there are some lots that don't meet our standard, that would allow some more building, and we would allow it to be residential. And so maybe the structure's a little smaller and the lot's a little smaller, but there is a need for those structure types, and I think in this area, that's a desirable thing, because you're close to a lot of amenities. Whether you're getting close to my age and want a walkable area, or if you're younger and just starting out, there's a lot of things to do down here in the cultural area and the downtown.
Well, I think we're starting to see across not only San Angelo, but the state, maybe even the nation, things, you use the word shrinking, but lot sizes, sizes of dwellings, housing is a huge need.
Yes.
In the nation, as well as the state, as well as San Angelo.
Yes.
So to do something that would, I'll say, inhibit that kind of growth, to me, would not be wise, just because of what appears to be trending. So thank you for the response.
Well, you said another word that's really important, is connectivity. And one of the most important parts about this area is the connectivity to the north side of the river and the development that could happen on the south side of the river. We know that there's some key properties that are owned that will, in some time frame, be developed into commercial properties or residential properties. And that can change the dynamics and the energy and the interest level and the development area of this particular district that we're talking about.
Yes, ma'am.
We want to make sure we understand the big pieces of land that exist there, what's potentially going to be developed there, and make sure this is cohesive with what we think is going to happen, so we don't have to, property by property, come back and rezone it.
Right. And I think that goes back to some of our purpose statements about predictability. I think developers that are looking into our city, whether they're local or outside of our city, they want to know the rules, they want to follow them, but they want it predictable. They don't want them to change in a few months. They want it very predictable so they can understand what they need to do. They can look at their pro forma and say, okay, this is gonna work. And so I think anything we can do as a city to help foster those things, the better off we will be in the future.
And that was the RUDAT plan to begin with, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Can we
go
talk a
ahead.
little bit more
I'm
about?
sorry.
Sorry, jump back to the page you're just on.
This one here, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So higher protection for residential, only allow RM1 uses in current RS2 and RS1 zone properties and no commercial development. Can you expand, I guess, so everybody understand what's allowed in RM1 and what would, I guess, what the increased intensity that's allowed over and above what's currently allowed in those residential areas?
Okay.
Again, RS1 and RS2, because RS2 is not listed on here, so you got to go back through that.
Yeah. So the RM1, the only reason I listed it here is that it would allow short-term rentals by right in the RS1 and the RS2 areas. The structure types are very similar. They're still going to allow either a single-family residence or a two-family residence. The RS3, which RM1 also allows, is really townhome and twin home. In infill, those usually don't work very well because you've already got established property structures and there's property line challenges, setback challenges. And so really you're looking at housing structure type, being a single-family house, being a two structures on a property, or a duplex, an accessory dwelling unit, something like that. The RM1, the reason to do it at RM1 would allow the short-term rentals by right in those areas, but if, again, another layer of protection for those areas, say, okay, no, we're not doing RM1, we would only do RS1 and RS2, and that would put the 500-foot buffer around any short-term rental that were in those districts. So it would limit the number of short-term rentals.
And basically, you just exclude any commercial use of property in that area.
Yes,
So
sir.
like the mayor mentioned.
Correct.
Salon or whatever. Couldn't-
Correct. It would not be a neighborhood commercial, it would not be a general commercial, office commercial allowable zone.
So really, the only change would be the requirements around STRs and that.
Yes, sir.
So be very specific in terms of what this would change in terms of zoning. Will this change zoning for anybody down the road?
As I
Or
believe,
currently.
as I believe we're leaning towards with the RS1 and the RS2, they would not have a zone change. They would stay their zoning being RS1 and RS2. They would just simply be within the design district boundaries. And they would continue to operate as long as they chose to. And if they chose to make a change in the future, that would be those property owners or owner to do that.
Okay. Is that clear? Okay.
So here's some of those new development standards. Again, commercial, there are some of the smaller lots, even in the commercially areas that are vacant. We would allow a smaller lot size and a smaller minimum lot size. Right now, you have to have 6,000 square feet to develop commercially. We know some of our small commercial folks need smaller than that. They don't need that much space. Excuse me.
But describe what would go on a smaller space like that.
I could see in the commercial area, so if someone wanted to do a pottery studio, and the back of their house is actually where they do the pottery and maybe do some pottery classes, and then they have a display area in the front, and you're only needing 1,500 square feet or 2,000 square feet, you don't need a big lot to build that out.
And that would fit perfectly into this cultural district overlay.
Yes, it would. And if you're looking to locate those types of amenities within our cultural district, I think you're drawing in the same crowd that's looking at those historic pieces, those heritage pieces, those art and culture pieces. So they're willing to go and window shop or go into a store and check things out. On the residential side, we stayed pretty much with the same, except that we are, our current standard lot is 5,000 square feet, which is 50 by 100. We did notice some of those lots that are zoned RS1 and RS2 are smaller than that, and so we allowed a smaller lot size so they don't have to go through a ZBA process. We maintained the setbacks that we currently have for residential, except for the rear yard setback. We made it 5 feet. And if you look at a lot of the structures in those areas, particularly where commercial comes up, that's where those setbacks are at 0 feet now. And so we didn't think 5 feet was unreasonable because it still gives the fire separation needed by fire code. Details and restrictions. Again, I think we've talked about this first one, that in the RS1 and RS2, we would not allow the short-term rentals by right. They'd have to go through a conditional use. Everywhere else would have the short-term rentals by right, which they currently do today, based on their zoning. We would allow artisan manufacturing by right. That's a special category in our zoning ordinance, and we would allow that by right in those commercial areas. The outdoor storage limit to 30% of the property, and that's really for our light manufacturing, heavy commercial, because right now they have unlimited outdoor storage. It would only impact if they made some type of change in the future. They chose to add to their building or do something different that was a change of occupancy, then it would change. Our general commercial is actually capped at 20%. So we're actually giving a little bit more than what we do in our general commercial. And a lot of that has to do with we're trying to provide an area that if people want to display things that for sale, that might be an option down in this part of town.
So the art community,
The
for
art community,
example,
yes, ma'am.
a cultural district for
Yes, ma'am.
interest. And how would that compare to, go back to your other screen. So, no,
Oh, sorry, ma'am.
that screen. So based off of the rest of the city, how does this compare again for minimum lot size, minimum lot width, minimum lot depth? These numbers compared to traditional housing, residential?
This allows a smaller lot size, but maybe more structure fitting on that lot size. It also allows for a structure that can fit the needs as opposed to finding only something that's 5,000 square feet, which then triggers some other things to be done by codes. These smaller structures are easier to build, easier to maintain, and are able to move forward in a more simple fashion through the permitting process if you're building new or even renovating under the existing building code. We believe the residential setbacks are equivalent to what we have now, the 5-yard setbacks. Most of those structures in that part of town are older structures, and they're closer to the front setback than our normal, what we would call our suburban neighborhoods that are 25 feet back. We're also looking at this would, as Luke alluded to, is that this would add a little more density in the area, potentially, if those property owners wanted that. If they wanted to have a mother-in-law suite, or if they wanted to have something else that they could rent out to another person, and they would be able to rent out. I also
But
think
in a cultural district overlay, why would you want more density? That would be confusing.
Well,
Why?
You want more people. You want more traffic. You want people to go and see those amenities and why it makes San Angelo unique and special, why we care about our culture, our art, our historical features that we have. And
But they could live there, but they couldn't be an artisan.
that
and
would be, in those two areas, that would be the challenge for them. Yes, ma'am. Oh, excuse me. So then we have the sign specific. This mirrors our sign ordinance. Signs, billboards, and signs over 75 square feet are regulated. Basically, you can't have a sign over 75 square feet, and billboards are not allowed in the district.
What happens to one that's already there?
It becomes non-conforming.
And then what happens?
It stays until it potentially is gone in the future by some natural cause or disaster or something of that nature. It stays as long as it is a safe, viable structure. We have a hard time removing those just by changing the zoning district on them. They have some legal rights to keep that structure there. And we do have some clauses in our zoning ordinance for those that become minimally damaged and how they could go through to get them repaired properly.
So one of the reasons why you want an overlay is to protect ourselves from these billboards being put up in a historic district. Without the historic overlay or the cultural district overlay, what could happen happened already.
Yes, ma'am.
And do we know how many billboards are in this area by chance? I can think of one, I believe.
I know of, I believe, two total.
Okay.
There are some that folks might perceive as a billboard, but it's actually under the size limit for a billboard. They're still large signs. They are bigger than the 75 square feet, but they're also not a billboard.
Are those mostly on the Coningheim Abe locations?
They're actually south of this district. The ones that I'm thinking of are on Chadburn and Oaks that run through the heart of this district.
So no billboards,
That's as proposed,
except
yes,
that they're
ma'am.
already there.
Yes, ma'am. Another specific restriction was intermodal containers, and we talked with folks that on the residential use properties, they would not be allowed. That was a concern by residents. There was also concern by commercial properties that they would need them for storage, for security, for other reasons. And so we came up with that if you're a commercial property or use, you would be allowed to have one, but there are some screening options, being a fence with a minimum 6 foot of height, that's an opaque fence, landscaping that's large enough to cover 60% of the vertical height of the container and 80% of the horizontal width of the container, or a full mural covering the visible side of the container from the right-of-way. And it's really to visually protect the district of, okay, here's just a big metal box sitting there. While we understand the needs for commercial properties and security and storage, we also know that we're moving towards a more visually appealing district for our citizens and our visitors. And we think this is a low threshold to meet to be able to do that.
So go back up to item 3, outdoor storage limited to 30% of the property. Does that require fencing?
Yes, if that would require fencing within our ordinance. It would only require opaque fencing when they make a change. And so currently, if they're still operating, they don't make a change, it wouldn't require opaque fencing today. But if they chose to add to their structure, change the use of their property, we would require opaque fencing at that time. We encourage it because those, again, could be palettes for artists to do different things on some of that fencing to help celebrate the area.
Mayor.
Yes.
Aaron, the topic we had a lot of discussion on 2 weeks ago, which will come back at some point. For those RS1, RS2 districts, and somebody either, let's say, needed or wanted a carport, would that be allowed in this area?
Carports.
Sorry.
I believe this is in the open structure overlay, as it is one of our older neighborhood areas. I would double check that. If you're looking at doing a carport or an open structure, please check with us and we're happy to help and find a way. But yes, we believe that there would be a way to do an open structure or carport, especially if you don't have a garage or something like that. I believe this is in the open structure overlay, but I would really like to make sure that our staff visit with the citizen or the contractor to ensure that they don't have any hiccups in the future.
You know, because we, go
Sorry.
ahead. So because we are talking about a cultural district, art district, if you will, whether you call it cultural or cultural art district. We know in many cities where you have these overlays, you have many artists who want to live in this kind of an area.
Yes.
So that one could come and spend a week in San Angelo, Texas, and visit art house and studio, whatever. We want to enhance the cultural art element, which ties in so terrifically with our river and what happens north of the river. Does this leave us the flexibility, does it leave a flexibility to allow for those kinds of development from a business perspective?
Yes, we believe it does. See if I can get back to one of the maps real quickly. I mean, if we're just looking at those two smaller areas of residential, look at the large areas that there are still some residential type structures in there, but they would allow some commercial utilization in there. Or there's some smaller commercial buildings that could be converted to residential commercial together. Or they could do a co-op in some areas. And we know that like Art and Uncommon Places has a great facility down there that they might be able to rent out space to do some different art things there. And still have a house that's within a walking distance or a short-term rental that's within walking distance to go over and do those things. So we believe that flexibility is built within this cultural district overlay zone and would allow that to continue to grow and thrive.
You know, one of the projects that has happened, which I think everyone I wish we had it before and after, but Hardeman Pass, where David Major has purchased what some people considered like one of the worst eyesores in this area. And what has happened is turned it into something that is visually appealing
Yes.
and will be utilized. And that's the kind of thing that we want to see happen. And then the building next to it also has been improved by the nature of the mural that's on that wall. And it is another structure that other people or everybody commented on how horrible those two structures were and did not enhance anything for the city of San Angelo, tourism, et cetera.
And I believe along the Washington and Highland entry corridors, there's a number of those buildings. Even the moving company that's down there, they've done a nice mural on their building, and it really enhances the drive coming into the fort. Is oh wow, you're starting to see art. You're starting to see other things that our community cares about what's happening in this area. And I think everybody in the room here today cares about what's happening in that area and how do we continue to help it grow, help protect it for the next generation.
Howard Taylor used to always, or talked a lot about, I think it's Avenue B, and wanted us to be able to really highlight when you turn off of the Bryant Boulevard and head over towards what is hopefully a cultural district overlay, so that people so they can find it, because otherwise they go down, turn on Concho, maybe wind back over there and maybe find something that we have. There has to be a unity, something that brings it all together, something that says to people, turn right here and find this incredible area called the Cultural Arts District. And that's Avenue B,
Yeah.
which leads straight into many of these assets that we have.
It certainly is.
Yeah, say that loudly.
And again, the connectivity.
And talking yesterday with Laura Weingard on the Texas Commission of the Arts, she says that's the key is having wayfinding to your cultural district to come in and find those key amenities that you're trying to direct people to, and through those corridors that you're protecting them. Talking with her, there's been this question about are we doing something that's contrary to the Museum of Fine Arts? And they simply stated absolutely not. Their program is under the Texas Commission of the Arts. Ours is a zoning overlay, which enhances their district and allows them to continue to move towards more economic change, allows them to continue to apply for grants for funding for different types of things in that area. And so we're very excited about that we can continue to work together to enhance those two things.
I think the other issue that we have to be well aware of is if you take a look at affordability and property values and property per square foot, some of this district allows for people to buy property at a value price and develop it into something that might not enhance this district. That too is another reason why we want to protect it, because there are a lot of affordable dollar per square foot properties here that could work against what we're trying to achieve.
That's correct, Mayor, and with zoning, we're looking at stabilizing those property values as one of our key tenets as we look at zoning is this development going to help pay for itself for the goods and services they receive? And so that is always a concern, and with infill, that's a better way to do that, and it helps stabilize that area for longer term. The last item on this slide I want to make sure on number 4 is that as a specific restriction, community services of itinerant sheltering or alcohol and drug treatment shall not be allowed as a new use. That means if one is existing, they would be allowed to continue. To our knowledge currently, that we do not have any that are existing. Itinerant sheltering is 30 days or less, and that's why that's a specific term in the zoning ordinance. That's also what we talk about hotels and things like that. This does not prevent hotels. It's based on if you're community services. So if you're a commercial entity and wanting to bring in a hotel, those things are allowed. Or if you wanted to bring in a short-term rental, those are allowed. But this is itinerant sheltering or alcohol and drug treatment as a new use in those areas.
What businesses would not be allowed to open up in this district?
Well, again, I think the simplest is the alcohol and drug treatment. We would not allow those under our section 313, which is our use table. Community houses, which are commonly referred to sometimes as halfway houses, but community houses, they're not allowed in the district in any of those areas. And itinerant sheltering is really that we as a community believe there are places and appropriate places like our emergency shelter with the Salvation Army and other places that are already identified, and that we don't need additional emergency sheltering at this time until we identify as a community where those need to be.
Vaping's not allowed.
Say that again, ma'am?
Did you say vaping was not allowed?
I did not say vaping was not allowed. Vaping in a commercial, a general commercial, vaping stores are allowed. There's nothing in legislation at the state level or our local ordinance that prevents them. But again, if we're protecting those residential areas, they will not be in the residential areas of RS1 and RS2. Design standards, this is one of the other questions. Again, we're exempting those single-family, two-family residential from the design requirements. In general, the design changes should meet one or more of the following requirements. It doesn't have to meet all, doesn't have to meet every one. The first one was the River Corridor Master Development Plan. That's pretty specific of what has there. This second one is embodies characteristics distinct to type, period, or method of construction or architecture. And what that really means is if you were a 1970s warehouse and you were built with metal cladding, you're going to get to go back with that metal cladding. We're not going to say you've got to change it to a 1920s style. I know that's in some people's minds that somebody will say you have to do those things, but that's the reason that line item is in there is if you're able to prove up that it was built here, this style, this time, you get to continue to stay that way. We're not trying to make you change. Is associated with the lives or persons significant in local, regional, state, national, or international history, represents distinct and familiar visual feature of a neighborhood or city. And I think about a lot of those structure types that over time that even if they are in the commercial area, but they were a craftsman house, is there a way to preserve that if a small commercial unity went in there that's outside of the RS1, RS2, and represents the works of a master designer, architect, builder, or craftsman. Are there any questions about the design standards before I move on?
Who's going to be responsible for determining whether or not something meets one of these?
Well, we would ask the applicant to choose which one they're meeting. I think staff would have a discussion with them if something seemed odd, but really it's going out and looking at the property and saying, okay, we agree with you. those properties that are already historically overlaid, they continue to keep that historic overlay, and they're at the highest threshold of meeting a standard. And then it starts coming down based on the age of the property. Ultimately, if it's a new structure going up, Design and Historic Review Commission will have that authority to make some decisions. City staff has a number of things that we can do administratively. If there's, for some reason, there's disagreement between city staff and applicant, it can always go to the Design and Historic Review Commission. And ultimately, if they don't agree with them, it can also go back to our city council and have them make the final decision at that point. The goal is not to penalize developers or people that are trying to redo structures and make things more safe, more aesthetically pleasing. It is to work with them and to find some common solutions to enhance the area, and how do we make this a good place to be for everyone that wants to be there.
Well, what about signs in that area? If it was a historical sign that's been there and it doesn't meet the criteria going back, it got destroyed or something, would it be able to go be put back?
The question is if it was destroyed, and then there's some provisions in the zoning ordinance for items that were 100% destroyed, over 50% destroyed, or under 50% destroyed. So there's a possibility. We have to prove up why. And if it was truly a historic sign, I think there are ways that we as a community would support that. If it's just a generic sign, everyday sign that gets destroyed, and it's over maybe the size limit, I think we would say we need to downsize that just a little bit.
Further questions? Yes, Lucy?
Aaron, when y'all had these town hall meetings, what was the reaction of the public? How did they embrace it, or what was their concerns?
I think their concerns, I would say the main concern is there were some that felt like the process was going too fast.
How many years have we been working on this? So I don't know how fast or how slow, but does 10 years qualify as fast? I don't know.
I think some also were trying to understand the details of what does it really mean, what are we regulating. Obviously, like the intermodal containers, we had first written it as none, not allowed. We've gone back and changed that based on feedback that we've had. Same thing with the two residential areas, primarily the RS1 and the RS2, is let's give them some more protection. Instead of allowing commercial to go in there, let's take the commercial out. I think that's kind of the main items. I would say there were folks that were very supportive, and there were folks that still just had questions.
So their questions were answered.
We
more
gave
or
them
less.
answers.
And and there was a negotiating around.
There was some, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so
That's
much.
what you're seeing today.
Yes.
Other questions, comments from council? Larry?
The mayor mentioned vaping, but this certainly goes well beyond those bounds. I don't know if there's any gray areas, but there's some of them that I think most of us would find not fitting in with the cultural area. Can you expand on that, please?
So currently, we don't have anything in our ordinance that addresses vapes. Our ordinance is from 2000. Vapes really were created and started becoming popular in 2008. We have had a case in front of the zoning board of adjustments that said in neighborhood commercial and lower commercial zonings, they're not appropriate, but that allows in higher commercial zonings. In this area, we believe general commercial is a use that should be allowed. Vapes do fall into the general commercial realm, and they don't have any state regulation as far as distances from other properties or things like that. There could be some legislation that happens at the state level to do that, but nothing has come forward, and we have not brought anything forward until we work on our comprehensive plan and our zoning ordinance as a unified whole. So right now, they would be allowed in some of those spaces. As you look at your map, anywhere that looks like it's commercial outside of those two that are the light yellow and the medium yellow, they could be allowed in those areas. Now, they'd have to meet all the development standards. They may have to do a change of occupancy and do things like that, which means meeting the parking requirements and the signage requirements and everything. And I would say most of those stores are looking for high traffic areas. And
That's
so
key. Yeah.
So you see them on Chadburn on the north side of town, you see them on Avenue N, you see them on Sherwood Way. Those are our arterial streets that are higher in traffic and probably have a demographic that's going through there that they're looking for to come in and sell to.
High traffic, high visibility, this district wouldn't qualify for those two elements. But Karen, go ahead.
Could the planning commission weigh in, and perhaps you as well, Aaron? Is there a creative way to deal with that? Perhaps tagging that sort of operation as a conditional use?
We could add that to the use table as a conditional use in this district. I mean, we did go in and put in some specific restrictions, if that's a desire of putting in a specific use as a restriction. We could put that in there. It would fall under probably retail sales and services. And we would have to, since vape is not defined in our ordinance, I may have to lean on Brandon a little bit to help us on how we would do that, but.
Yeah, I would be worried about the noticing of this hearing if we were trying to restrict vape and adding a new restriction in the ordinance that we'd be adopting today. I don't think we could do that without giving additional notice to the public.
So you can't pull away from retail sales and services a specific type of business without notification, you're saying?
Yeah, because we'd essentially say that today they could possibly do that, but after we pass this, they wouldn't be able to do that. And so in Chapter 211 of the Local Government Code, we have to send specific notices that say we may be affecting the classification of your property, and that's actually kind of why we're here today, because we're doing that. So if we haven't notified them for that particular restriction, I don't think we could adopt that today.
Well, I think one of the comments that comes up is the whole issue and concern about residential areas in terms of turning a residential area in the middle of the block into a commercial business of some sort.
Right.
But legitimately, most businesses who want to be successful need high visibility and high traffic. This district does not have high visibility for a commercial business, and it does not have high traffic. And those two things in themselves limit the amount of interest that would exist for turning some of this residential area into commercial.
And if you see any of those areas that are pink of any shade, those uses are allowed today. And they're not
Can't
there
change
today.
that.
Yeah, and they're not there today. So I don't think this change would highly entice them to come into that area. Higher traffic over time might, but hopefully at that time, maybe we've found a different way to say, all right, we want to regulate certain types of businesses in a certain way. And I think that is certainly something on our plate for the future.
Karen?
So just confirming, we could consider that in the future if that is of interest to people, and that would be okay with you as well, Brandon. So
Absolutely.
I still would like to hear the Planning Commission's opinion. I'm suggesting that perhaps, and again, it's premature, to make them a conditional use in any zoning, and then consider restricting the zoning that allows them. It's a little, but I think it might work. So maybe later.
Eric, you want to open up, Luke, you want to open up that conversation for anyone on the Planning Commission who might want to add to Karen's comment?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what the Planning Commission has thoughts on that, or input from you, Aaron, as well, and Brandon, too. I think that's the biggest key is how to go about trying to impose some type of restriction on a specific type of business, basically GC zoning.
I think it would be going back and doing the research, just like we did for short-term rentals. What is going on at the state level, all the way down to local levels, knowing what our local desire is. We would like some restrictions in some locations I would think most of our citizens are saying, okay, well, those are restricted to people over 21 years of age. What other businesses do we restrict like that, and where do we restrict them to? And then find the appropriate zoning or process, whether that's a conditional use or other, to move through them so that they can become legal businesses in the right locations. Many cities do that. Many cities are looking at that regulation. And I think it's really us coming forward with something that's thoroughly researched, that we've had some town hall meetings with the industry to find out if there's compromises, is there things that we need to be considerate of. But again, this area, our historical areas, protection is the main idea, and how do we continue to protect those areas and our historic neighborhoods and new neighborhoods too.
And I'll just add, when we were preparing for the ZBA case, I researched on this, and I mean, there wasn't really case law that dealt with this, and I think a lot of cities are struggling, and they are addressing it kind of like we did the STRs. I mean, some are putting in distance limitations and things of that nature. So until those cases are heard or the legislation changes on it, yeah, I think it's kind of up to us to adopt reasonable regulations for those types of businesses.
Karen?
I don't want to get too far off the course of the main conversation, and this may get some giggles, but how does does adult entertainment fit into this template? We are very close to one of those entities, just outside the boundary of this
So
right now.
those have very specific rules within our zoning ordinance already that significantly limits their locations in any part of town. There's really not any other spaces that they can expand into, which is why you don't see any others within our city limits. So this cultural district, they actually do fall inside the district just barely. And so we would actually have some design control if they chose to do something to the outside, but it does not prevent them from being a business as long as they continuously operate and are not vacant for more than 2 years. If they go vacant for more than 2 years, then we'd have a different discussion of change of occupancy at that point.
Other questions, other comments from council? Continue.
All right. Yes,
So I know that we had kind of touched on this, on the zoning portion when it comes to those types of entities. Technically, if they fill out the application that says that they are just a retail, that they don't have to specify that they're a vape store, correct?
We do ask those questions when they come in, because occupancy is based on what exactly are they doing under the building code and the fire codes. And so those teams ask those questions. They then talk with our planners to say, is that an allowable land use in that area? So those communications happen because not everybody understands the forms and fills them out as complete as we may need. And then there's also communications with the applicants on that.
So if they were not just selling specifics, is there a certain percentage? Let's say they sell clothes and they sell sodas and snacks. Is that still falling into the retail?
That would still be a retail
would still
sales
be
and
allowed.
service store. That'd be more like a convenience store use than
Figured that's a loophole.
just a one single source of item.
But has anything slipped through the cracks, if you will, currently, that has allowed somebody to open up without us catching it, without the planning commission knowing what was going on?
Well, I'd say one of our limitations in our zoning ordinance is it doesn't speak directly to vapes. And so unless it's a change of occupancy under the building code, that would be the time that we would catch it, and we have caught some of those. The other thing is a lot of our properties are zoned that dual zoning, general commercial, heavy commercial. And so even down Avenue N, where it butts right up against residential and ASU, that's general commercial, heavy commercial. And there's lots of different uses in there, and some of them work really well. But those are areas that particularly vape stores identify because there's high traffic. So, but I don't think we've had a proliferation of items closer to neighborhoods per se, and we just haven't been notified of this as an issue.
So if it's sold out of the back bedroom, you don't know about it?
We don't know about it unless there's a complaint.
Understand.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We'll let PD deal with those things.
Okay.
So this here is a map of the area. You see the red boundary. This is the Fort Concho Historical District that encompasses Fort Concho and Fort Concho Elementary. This is the Old Town District that encompasses Old Town Historic Area, the fort, and the river stage. And you can see a few other properties that have historic designations through here. And then the green is the river corridor that kind of snakes through here and buffers the river. So what we're saying, through this cultural overlay district, all those areas would be in the cultural overlay zoning district. The historic would maintain their historic nature, and then everybody else is under the same rules for the design district that we wouldn't be changing. I show this just so you know where there are some historic properties in there. They are protected individually. Again, that residential area is right here, and of course you can see there's some that would be under, right along Bird Street, the north side of Bird Street, under the river corridor. And over here, this primary area, there's some that are under the river corridor. Again, they're exempt if they're residential, and all residential under this going forward would be exempt, one family, two family, unless they have a historic overlay. So our recommendation from city staff and the committee that put this together is approval of the cultural district overlay zone, amending section 311 of the zoning ordinance, creating a new land use cultural district overlay zone, CD, in section 304 of the zoning ordinance, and amend the use table, section 313. And I've got two caveats. One is that the RS1 and the RS2 areas would not allow commercial use. And then two, there is a statement on the very front of one of the packets that talks about an underlying zoning. There is no underlying zoning, and we will strike that statement under established. And I'll read it to you right now. It says, allowed use of all property included in the cultural district overlay zone shall continue to be governed by the base zoning district and all regulations pertaining thereto. We are striking that statement. When this was first drafted, we considered keeping all those zoning districts, but over time it became apparent that that was not, and we got more into the details, and that line just needs to be stricken from there so that everybody knows that we're all on the same rules except for the RS1 and the RS2, and that is what staff's recommendation is today to the Planning Commission and ultimately to the City Council today. And so I'm here to answer any other questions. I think that's it that we have right now.
I just want to make a statement, and that is that the whole purpose of creating this cultural district overlay is truly to protect and preserve without taking away private property rights. We're trying to protect people. And again, I say because of the many buildings, lots, over the years have been purchased because of the price, the low valuation of those buildings, and turned into warehouses or facilities that do not enhance our area that we talk about today, as well as the downtown area. We want to make sure that people continue to invest in our community, that they continue to look as our community and take it with pride, and to preserve the key aspects of what make this the great city that it is. And a lot of it really runs around Concho River, north and south. This has been a 10-year process, so anyone who says, why are you hurrying it up? 10 years is a long time to discuss it, think through it, and come up with ideas. Today, I believe, is a great concept. It's a great layout of what it should be, could be, and it keeps us protected and preserves who we are and the opportunities to continue to develop the cultural art district. You know, we were named the visual art capital for a reason. We want to enhance that. There are many other communities who want to take that away from us. Yes. And so we want to make sure that what we do today enhances that right to have the visual art capital. We don't want to lose it. And we want to protect the arts and the culture of this district, which is everything from historic to the Museum of Fine Arts to the Railroad Museum to our historic downtown. We've got to be forward-thinking. If we wait, we'll regret. And I just want to make sure that we understand the importance of today's decision. It's been a long time coming. It's not a hurried up. It's 10 years in the making. And we need to make sure we finalize and take away the fear factors that people have, knowing that we're trying to protect property rights and to protect the future image and historic elements that exist for the city of San Angelo. Luke, it's in your hands.
If y'all have no other questions for me, I think that would be our next step,
Yep.
is to move to public comment.
We have some questions, and I have
Sure.
some comments too, but I just.
Great.
Do we make public comment before we have a motion on the floor?
That's a great question. We probably normally would have the motion, and yes, that is correct. Thank you,
Yeah,
Mayor.
so we need a motion and then public comment, but the council, yes, but your council can ask
You the
questions.
first, yes. And then a motion would come. Then public comment, yes.
It should be the
We
opposite
consider the public's comment before we make our.
before a motion is made.
Yeah, generally, I think Planning Commission does allow public comment, and then we'll make their motion.
So along Irving, Chadburn area, there is.
Could you talk more into the microphone,
Yes,
Joe,
excuse
please?
me. Along Irving and Chadburn area, there's commercial and residential mixed.
Yes.
And the pink area between like Avenue C and Avenue B, there's houses in there. So short-term rentals would be okay if someone bought those houses in the commercial area, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Would the 500 feet extend over into the yellow area?
It does not currently, so if you have those two boundaries backing up, it would not overlap with the 500 feet. They would still be allowed by right.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything?
Sure. So I'm going to kind of zoom in right here. So you see this purple area, say if there's a residential house right here that they choose to do a short-term rental, they do not have to get a conditional use, and they are not subject to the 500-foot boundary. If you were here in the RS2, you would have to do a conditional use, and then around your property is a 500-foot boundary. Now, if that 500-foot came into the purple area, it would not affect the purple area.
So I just want to clarify a little further on that too, with the way that you've proposed the optional, or the option, I guess, to zone more or less in line with RM1 in those residential areas, that STRs would be allowed by right, and they're not subject to the 500-foot rule if we approve it that way, correct?
That is correct. So if this yellow was to change to an RM1, which is still a residential use, would not allow commercial, but the only difference would allow short-term rental by right, so no conditional use by planning commission, and no 500-foot buffer between short-term rentals.
But that would exclude other types of commercial use in those areas.
Correct. It would not allow other commercial entities. It would not allow neighborhood commercial, office commercial, general commercial, none of that. Wouldn't allow a tax office. And same with the RS1 area over here.
Okay, so this is just probably being a dead horse, but if you look at the area between Avenue A and Avenue B, where you've got basically several blocks of currently CGCH and one half a block of residential. Let's just say someone comes in and purchases that yellow area that's engulfed by CGCH right there where you're at. What's the process now for them to come and convert that to commercial? Would they come in and rezone under the overlay?
Yes, they would come in and rezone under the overlay.
So would they just remove their RM
Yes, that is-
classification?
That is correct.
And then they're subject to the overlay?
That is correct.
I'm just trying to get my head around how that
And the
process
reason
would-
being, all these colors that are on there, They will all go away to one standard color, just like the central business district up here is one color. These colors would all go away to one standard color called CD. These yellow would stay either yellow or orange, depending on if you do RS2 or RM1, they would stay. And then if somebody came in to rezone their property, then they would go back, they would go to the standard color of CD,
Okay.
is what we would recommend.
Just for clarification, so anything that's blue, pink of any sort, all of those would become some sort of gray, but yellow and orange would stay the same?
Well, the orange is RM1. That's a bigger area of low-rise multifamily use that could be there. Now, many of them are acting as single-family.
Right.
Our proposal is the light yellow RS1 and the darker yellow RS2
Okay.
would move to either RM1 or they would stay the same, one of those two options.
Okay.
But the orange that is there, they would actually go to the CD
Okay.
zoning district.
So I just have a few comments, I guess, and then I'd like to go to public comment. But, I think that it's important, I think it's very important for us to always keep in mind that anytime that we're taking a big swing at a large area and impacting people's ability to use their property for various reasons, we just need to be very careful about that. And so I think that I know that this process has been underway for a long time, but especially when it involves someone's home, I think we got to be very careful about that too. And so I think I think that there's a lot of merit behind what's being proposed here, and I think it's in line certainly with a vision plan and been in discussion for a long time, and I think there's a lot of good that could come of it and provide for long-term benefit for the whole area, for building it out and redeveloping it and connecting it to downtown. I think that there's some really good relaxation, I guess, of some of the restrictions and some of the challenges with some of these buildings, because as we've mentioned several times, the zoning in it is so eclectic, I guess, and it is difficult with a lot of these buildings being built long ago for uses that are not really pertinent anymore. And that can become a challenge, as we've seen in several cases in Planning Commission over the last several months. So I think, overall, I like the concept. I just want to be very cautious about any time that we're affecting people's property rights. And so, I think it's important, too, to understand that CGCH and light manufacturing surrounding residential areas is fairly intense. And so more or less what's being proposed across the board is to reduce the intensity as far as that's concerned. And so that's beneficial to those neighborhoods. At the same time, the initial proposal really includes some increased intensity within some of those neighborhoods. So I just want to be cautious as we go forward with that and be considerate of the people who live in those neighborhoods now and make sure that they have their buy-in. And that's why I want to open it up for public comment and hear from those residents.
Who has the highest level of responsibility towards personal property rights? Because if I live next door to someone, but I want to run a beauty shop out of my house, does the property owner next to me have the highest level of personal property rights versus me, who also have an investment in a facility and a need for income? Who has the highest level of authority for personal property rights?
Well, my answer would be the jurisdiction that oversees everyone. They're the ones trying to set a level playing field for all spaces, whether they're residential, commercial, industrial, and trying to apply the rules equitably across the playing field, if you will. While one property owner may say, well, that's my right to do this, if the jurisdiction has adopted ordinances or codes that say, here are the restrictions, then they may not be able to do that, and allows an adjacent property owner to say, hey, that's not allowed, I need to say something. But it really does come down to the elected officials who adopt the ordinances and say, this is what is fair for our community.
We might also, before we move on, light manufacturing, because today, if I have a skill level of welding that creates statues or pieces of art, that's considered light manufacturing. Is that correct?
We would consider it manufacturing by artisan, which we are allowing by right in this district. Whether you're doing metalworking, doing some things like that, because your volume is not as high. So think about Miss Rio's corn products. That's a light manufacturing, that they're providing corn products for a wholesale out to other retailers, where most folks that are welders and making ornamental art of some kind, while they may do some wholesale, it's not high volume, and they normally sell just to individuals in a retail sales format. And so that is really kind of the goal of allowing the manufacturing by artisans, as well as bringing artisans to a cultural area that more than likely will have people that are visiting that are interested in their goods and services, and they can have those conversations in their shop or on their site.
So if I make jewelry in my house, in my back bedroom,
I think you could probably make it in your house. It depends on where you choose to sell it. Now, we know people do it online all the time, but it's hard to drive people to your house to come and buy things on a high enough volume that it's really your primary business. Again, I think there are times that people might complain about those things, and it all comes down to traffic generation, particularly in those residential areas. But the idea is to create areas of commerce within this district that allow the entire district to thrive.
thank you.
I do have a question
Yeah.
in regards to, I'm comparing the cultural district that we're looking at to the tiers. And it doesn't look like some of the new proposed area is currently included in like the tiers funding. Have we
Correct.
had any discussions on potentially moving the tiers boundaries in order to assist some of the property owners in our new area to make the improvements that we would love to see as a city?
I think that's a longer-term discussion, because moving or changing the boundaries of a tiered district.
can't do it.
It's very, very difficult,
No, you can't do it.
and we have about 10 more years to go. So we need to be strategically thinking about that over the next 10 years of if our community wants to continue a district in a different area, have multiple districts, but I think for this area that may be an option. But again, through the Museum of Fine Arts, under the Texas Commission on the Arts, they have some grant funding opportunities through their district, which both districts are very, very similar. And so I think we would tend to turn people towards them for advice and direction if they're outside of the tiers district.
The other key issue in tiers is the amount of residential that you have. So it has to be highly driven. You're very limited to a percentage that can be residential in order to qualify for tiers. So that becomes an important conversation. If there's an interest to doing that, if you have this high level of residential, you'll just qualify.
And our Public Works team, they've gotten a large grant through TxDOT that's going to add a wonderful pathway sidewalk through Chadburn all the way down to Avenue L, which is going to connect some of these areas even better. There are some opportunities for tiers to partner with that in some other areas to continue that connectivity. And so I think there's some options there that it may not directly impact the private structures, but it will certainly impact those private properties in a positive way.
Ma'am?
Yes, Karen?
I'd like to go back to the mayor's question to you about who is the highest authority. And just for point of interest, in the state of Texas, legislation exists to encourage cultural districts and to influence development density through zoning regulations. The Texas Commission on the Arts can designate cultural districts. There are special zones aimed at boosting local economies and community vitality through cultural resources. Additionally, state law addresses development density, sometimes limiting municipal authority. And on that note, a couple of other things to keep in mind. There are 54 TCA-designated cultural districts in 41 cities in the state of Texas as per the Cultural Trust. There are bills being heard now, bills that have been introduced now, which aim to reduce city control over land use by imposing standardized regulations. And so something to keep in mind, I think particularly for those that are worried that this is happening too quickly. In parallel, our state government is acting to limit our ability to do this very thing. So it's as yet unresolved, but it's certainly something to keep in mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Luke, we took it over. Sorry, it's back in your hands.
I think I opened public comment a while back.
Scott Sustick.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mayor Gunter, City Manager Valenzuela, esteemed council members, concerned citizens, my colleagues from SAMFA. It's good to be here this morning, and I'll tell you 3 sweet words. I'll be brief. First of all, I'm concerned I won't be able to go to Brenda's barbershop. I'll have to keep going to A-Rock. As the curator of education for the SAMFA, I have been an educator and artist for 32 years plus. And I'm just here to advocate for kids because our visitors to the SAMFA San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts exceed 40,000 visitors per year, and more than 33,000 of those are school-age children. My concern is only signage, that people can find our programming, all right? So that's bus drivers and parents. We don't have wandering hordes of children roaming the city, thank the good Lord. But the signage, I just wanted to make sure that we are able to promote our programming in a respectful way. We only have simple 4x8 vinyl signs printed up, designed by graphic designer Katie Villa. I can email a sign if you would like to see an example, but I think that's unnecessary considering they're 32 square feet, well under the 75 square feet limit. But I just want to know that the museum can continue to promote our programming with signage. We might have 6 exhibits per year, plus what's in the education department and the Concho Clay Studio, and people need to be able to find those places. That's all. That's my concern. So under the current signage, where there's maybe 30 days for temporary signs and maybe limited to 3 times per year, would that affect our programming and our ability to advertise what's inside the museum?
Well, we're doing another section on signage right after this conversation. So
Okay.
does this come under this overlay, or does it come into the conversation about signage?
It is mentioned in this overlay about the limitations, and the gentleman is right that it would be 3 times per year that you'd be allowed in 30 days. I think that can be adjusted if necessary. The challenge is we just see a proliferation of banners as opposed to regular signs, but there are maybe some temporary signs that might be more appropriate in how we classify things as temporary signs versus banners. But I'd be happy to visit with them to make sure that they're in compliance and not be restricted in some way to allow their programming to continue.
Well, and I think we can get into further depth. You bring it up, and it's obviously a piece of this, but as we get into the 3B, where we really talk about signage, we could get a lot more specific.
Okay.
And open the window for that a little bit more, or
That's all
close
I
the
had.
window.
I was just concerned, so do I email you, Aaron, if we have a new sign proposed for a program or an exhibit?
Yeah,
Give a thumbs up.
let's certainly talk later this week, and
Okay.
we can sit down and find the
Thank
right
you.
way to work through it.
Appreciate it.
Roy Sesh.
Thanks for being patient with us.
Thank you. I'm Roy Zesh. I'm president of the San Angelo Association of Realtors. Some concerns about this, and part of it is that, yes, it does feel rushed and not well thought out. And I know that there's been things happening in the background for 10 years, but I suspect many of the property owners in this area had no information about this until a few months ago. So there was very little attendance in the town halls. Does that mean people consented to what was happening, or does that mean they were not aware of it, didn't understand the information that were presented? The second would be just the effect on affordable housing, because this is a fairly affordable neighborhood. If homes are converted to commercial uses, the dreaded short-term rentals, any of those kind of things, that's going to lower our inventory of affordable homes. Third would be the loss of zoning protection, and this has been discussed a good bit today in those residential zones. Do the residents that own homes or landlords that own homes in this understand the potential losses of their rights? Now, the flexibility is great. I mean, having Brenda's Barbershop in the front of your house is a great thing, but that also means you could have a bar next door to you. I mean, it's hard to restrict one and give the ability for the other one to happen. Then, big one is the loss of zoning rights for the people with the CGCH and the light manufacturing property owners. Do they know that? Are they aware of these things happening? Because you're potentially, I mean, obviously because they're grandfathering, those rights don't go away immediately. But if there's ever a change of use, a sale, different things like that, they are losing some potential rights in those areas. Another concern is that it's another layer of bureaucracy that people want to have to go through to get improvements made to their property. The city already is sort of difficult to work with by reputation, and adding another layer of bureaucracy, another group that can say no, doesn't seem like it will help. I do see lots of positives in the proposal. There is the flexibility you get to have some things, some light commercial uses, and what do those look like, but there's still a lot of concerns about the loss of owners' property rights and the lack of knowledge by the affected property owners, and that both residential and commercial in different directions. So, thank you.
Joe Chavarria.
Good morning, and I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. And I retired from 45 years on construction, so I know pretty much what goes on. And one thing that I want to make clear is that I didn't get no lettering for the second of this meeting here. And
You wouldn't get a letter talking about today's specific meeting. You should have received notification. If your house or business is within the zone, you should have received something in the mail.
I have 4 properties, and none of them got any letterings.
Mayor, so
And there's some other ones that I visit with them, and the same thing. They didn't have no letterings for this meeting, and the only meeting that I got was the very, very first one. On top of that, I understand that y'all been working on it for 10 years.
Well, not every day.
Us personally, as far as knowing about the subject, it's been 2.5 weeks max. And now it's, let's put it this way, they want to shove it down our throats that quick. We need some time. Because on the first meeting that I was there, some of that was some pretty good issues that were not answered. Questions that need to be answered completely straight out. I had the opportunity to be on just by word of mouth. I showed up on the second one without notice. And anyways, regardless, as far as my behalf, the 2 meetings were totally different versus today. So I just want to make sure, I bring this up, and we definitely need some more time. June, July, y'all had the opportunity to be on this here subject for 10 years. Why cannot we get 2 months out of it? Where we can have answers directly to the homeowners.
Do you have a question today for us that's not answered?
Well, one of them is, that concerns me on my neighborhood. I live on Allen Street. I own four properties, and Ray Zapata owns some too. There's another one that, in other words, there's two empty lots on Allen Street, and to my satisfaction, I feel great the way I am on that neighborhood because it's real Pacific, quiet area. The only noise that I hear would be just once.
Finish your sentence, yeah.
I'm sorry.
You're okay.
Once a year, 365 days, fireworks, and I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Monica Ramos.
Good morning, council, mayor. Sorry, excuse me, I should have said good morning to you first. Planning Commission. I'm Monica Ramos. I am the
That
director.
beep thing, what's going on?
It's a user error.
Out of
Okay.
control.
Not you, Monica. The system.
I'm the director of Downtown San Angelo. Oh. Good now? Okay. And we're in favor of this cultural overlay. It aligns with downtown. It complements downtown San Angelo. Of course, this is a given, the cultural significance that this provides or already exists. This will just enhance our cultural richness of our downtown and continue this southward. It highlights and supports artistic characteristics of our community, our traditions, and our heritage. So we'd like to see this. It brings people together, and it already is doing so with the Museum of Fine Arts, the Railway Museum, Fort Concho, the River Stage, the Concho River. This has already been mentioned that these are some of our greatest assets. And so to be able to have this overlay as something that we already see as being established, but now it's more official, this really adds to it. We've received calls to our office from people that have looked for studio space, for photography, or art studios. This is the perfect neighborhood for this to happen. This will bring people to this area, artists and craft makers, where they can share their work and really thrive in this cultural neighborhood. So we see this as a positive. It's positive, creative community development that we see as an opportunity. As far as the economic impact, we all know that tourism is a big deal for San Angelo and for downtown, especially. Tourists are just naturally drawn to beautiful and attractive places. And so as long as this district continues to grow and it'll be a draw, it needs to be cared for. And that's what this overlay does, is it cares for it. It'll encourage entrepreneurship with the small businesses like craft makers and artisans, being able to open up the door for them to have a little more opportunity of what they do as far as having their studio space, their galleries, their workshops within this corresponding neighborhood. So I wouldn't think of this as being something that's completely or drastically changing anything. It already is. This is just enhancing and protecting the uniqueness of this area. So we are fully in support of it. Thank you.
Lynn Shipley.
I would like to suggest that Bree proceed to me, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank y'all for having us. I'm Bree Perks. I'm the board chair at the San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts. So TCA, Texas Commission of the Arts, only meets once a year, and we would like the chance to review these changes with them and have input on how these changes could impact the cultural district, so we don't lose our designation and we can stay in compliance with Texas Commission of the Arts. We believe that our past director may have had knowledge and input on this matter, but the board was unaware of any discussions relating to the zoning changes until more recently, and then that have not had time to review the impact whether positive or negative it may have. We do want to support the development and growth of our cultural district, as well as protect and preserve San Angelo, and we appreciate you wanting to do that. And we want to be on board with it. We understand that you've had 10 years to review this, and we would just like the same courtesy as a board and as a community to have the time to review, understand, and make suggestions to these changes. We would like to, the Dallas Arts District has an MOU with the city, and it's something that we would like to discuss and maybe have in this, where we can come up with our ideas and your ideas, you know, that prevents non-art related development, so it doesn't alter the district's function. But we do want the growth, and we want to support the city with the cultural district and making it better. We just would appreciate a little more time as a board so we can meet and discuss, and for our building committee to meet and discuss.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron, does the Texas Commission on the Arts have any authority at all?
They have authority with the Fine Arts Museum for the district that they have created. For our zoning overlay, talking with them yesterday, that there are no issues with us doing a zoning overlay that changes the zoning or the design criteria that would be coming in. So currently, we feel like while the districts overlapped, had we called ours a different thing than the cultural district, I think we'd have a different discussion. But as they agreed, that's the only thing that's similar, is that the word cultural district is in both titles.
Correct.
Currently, they are separate districts. We want to enhance what the Fine Arts Museum does, and we have the zoning authority to help in those areas, and so we want to do that as a partnership. And I think moving down the road, an MOU might be a great opportunity to work out any types of issues or differences that can help enhance this area.
Thank you.
Mr. Shipley?
Mayor, City Council, and Aaron, I would like to take this opportunity to share just a few thoughts that we've continued to ponder since the last 8 months has been brought to our attention that there's going to be some changes, and they're being accelerated now. Now, I want to stop right here, and I'd like to give you a compliment, Aaron, on all this detail that you've gone into. You've done a fantastic job, and so it's really helped us to really align as much as we can with you all. Here's where we're at, as far as I see it. Right now, we want to do everything we can to be supportive. We want to grow the Museum of Fine Arts. I've been there now for just a little over 3 months, and it's amazing what you learn as you go through trying to bring new culture into our community and all the things that we have to align to make sure that our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But we've gotten into a situation here that everything's being accelerated. I do not see, after the many years that I've been in retail, over 50 years, why we have to accelerate this now. There's no reason. What we need to do is abide by our community and support our community as we move forward. So our request is, as Bree just commented on, that we move, okay, into June. Give everybody a perfect chance to be supportive of this program, because we want to be successful. We want to work with the city, but we feel like we're being forced to make a decision. There's been a lot of actions that have been taken that once we communicate a meeting, then we're immediately back to meeting middle of April, and then we're going to make a decision. I'm asking for that decision to be moved, and everybody here understands why. Because what we have to do is make sure it's the right move. We need to make sure everybody's involved. The last 8 months, okay, is when everything has started taking place. I've been here for 3 months, didn't know anything about it.
And so all this has come up in a very, very fast-paced time. So my request is to take a step back and listen to what everybody has. And let's make sure now, I know you all have stepped out. We've had several meetings. But what we need to do is we need to take everybody into consideration as we move forward. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I look forward to see what the outcome is because we all want a positive outcome. Thank you very much.
Steve Eustace.
Thank you very much. My name is Steve Eustace, and I own 3 properties in this district, but I primarily want to keep my comments in more of a general way. I'm an experienced commercial real estate practitioner and a private property rights defender, and I'm very familiar with zoning and rezoning. I've been doing it many years. I will have a recommendation at the end if my 5 minutes are not up by then. But there's a lot of material to cover here. I want to thank Mayor Gunter, first of all, for preserving the history of this town has been a really top priority of yours, and I thank you for that. And I want to thank Karen and the other people that came to town hall meetings. You sat and listened to concerns. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, is dialoguing and working through this. The staff has worked hard. Aaron has, I don't know how you do it, Aaron. And we've had a couple of tense moments, but as far as I know, we're all still friends. So that's good. I want to let you know that I am supportive of farming a cultural overlay district. I am supportive. But this is not the way to do it. And we can do much better than this, much better than this. Now, I love this city. I'm a 3rd-generation San Angeloan. I have substantial investments in this area and along the river. And to think that anybody would speak against the way we're doing this is an indication that we don't care about our community is just wrong. I love the fort. I love the Riverwalk. I love the Museum of Fine Arts, and I try to support all those. But this is rushed, very much so. To my knowledge, and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, because I asked you about this, we usually start new products or new changes with the Development Task Force meeting, which has been very, very good the last 3 or 4 years. That's where ideas start. Aaron, I don't remember this topic ever being at a Development Task Force meeting. I don't go to all of them, but I do go to most of them, and I do read the agendas. So I think it is rushed. The letter was sent out on February the 15th. No, it was sent out on a Tuesday into February, and our first town hall meeting was 1 week later from the date that's on the letter. Now, you got to assume it didn't arrive the next day. I didn't look at it till over the weekend, and we had a meeting Tuesday. Now, y'all may have been working on it for 10 years. That means that it's very complicated.
Is that an official 3-minute, or is that is this a beeper problem?
That was a 3 minutes. I think Mr. Eustace is asked to use 5 minutes, and that would be up to your discretion, I believe.
You have 2 minutes more.
Okay, so I don't know what the deal is on residential. I don't know why y'all are taking that out. That was part of the purpose of this, is to encourage these little shops, these little art studios. And now all of a sudden we're taking the residential out. Why even put it in there if we're not going to? I mean, what benefit is including it in the arts district if you're not going to do what the purpose was? And I assume y'all changed that in the last day or two, because that's really kind of the first I've heard of it today. So there's just so many resources to do this right. We don't know about this. The people don't read this kind of stuff. And I want to point out that our vision plan specifically states that we're supposed to provide opportunities to grow neighborhoods, to get them involved in planning and zoning activities, and strongly encourage representatives to use land applications to be involved in early on in the process, and we have not done that. I keep up with what's going on in the city, and I didn't know about this till I got that letter. So I want to tell you that all these commercial properties, they may be non-conforming immediately if you adopt this, but buildings are vacant for a long time in San Angelo. There's commercial buildings been vacant for 40 years, but we know one of these days somebody's going to invest in them. The marketing time for commercial building is 1 to 5 years. And so you think if you've got a warehouse and it's vacant, what are you going to have to do in 2 years? You lose that and you're going to have to put in general commercial? You're not going to encourage people to invest in this area. So I'm going to go to my recommendation, and I hope it didn't.
Is that within their 2 minutes or okay.
Ma'am,
Yeah, just making sure you're on the 2-minute time frame.
would you put up my recommendation, please? Instead of trying to amend this thing as we're going along here, because we haven't had time to flesh out all the problems. I don't understand why we don't understand that. We're not going to flesh out issues until we start talking about this with each other, having community meetings, and I know y'all have reached out, but that doesn't alter the fact that they don't know about it. So where'd it go? Where'd my overhead go? So I believe that we should adopt this plan, this cultural district, but limit it to what is colored in red. We might also consider going down a block to Highland and maybe over to the west a half a block. There's no residential in that. It's just commercial buildings. There's no warehouses. This is the plan I would like for us to adopt. We ought to use resources. We ought to work with the Texas Commission on the Arts. There are lots of professional organizations to help us do this. Let's have the best cultural district we can possibly have, not some put together.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Christopher Rourke.
Good morning, City Council.
morning.
My name is Christopher Rourke. I'm the current president of the San Angelo Railway Museum, also represented here by our vice president, Dr. Linda Bond. I have the privilege of being in this position after the retirement of Susana Valenzuela and the great work that the board has done up to that point. We are in support of this cultural district. The Railroad Museum falls underneath this new zoning district. We provide so many different things to the community, and we're lucky to have such a space and an environment and a venue to do that. We just recently had the kickoff of our new second Saturday events, Steam Days. Had numerous vendors come in, dozens of kids and their parents. Just a really unique time and space. We provide a lot of education. Sometimes unknowingly, I was privileged to observe a person who was about 20 years my senior, a little bit taller with gray hair, and his grandson come into the museum. And after I did my little spiel and talk, he picked up his grandson, and they were looking at different displays throughout the museum, and they keyed on a specific aspect of one. And there was a great grandfather teaching moment there, something that went way back into our historical past. And it was a neat event to see that past and history coming alive. We've been part of the community for 25 years as a museum. The depot dates back to 1910, and the railroad goes back to 1888. The railroad has historically brought people to San Angelo, whether to explore, to have business, to live, and to settle, or to visit. The museum continues that mission. We still bring people in from out of the country. We would like to partner with other railroad museums across the state and the country and network to where we can all share visitors back and forth. There's specific people that come just for railroading. I myself am a prenatal model railroader. My grandfather bought me a Lionel set before I was born. But the railroad community is very important, and also people that just look, they Google what's there to do in San Angelo, and they see great and wonderful things like our Performing Arts Museum and our Cultural Arts Museum, the river, and they see the Railroad Museum, and they come. So I think it's a great opportunity to have this more developed and to have it able to reach out to the greater community. And with that, we are in support of this, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Julie Raymond.
Julie, you're on.
Hello, I'm Julie Raymond, and I'm president of Art and Uncommon Places, and I am very, very excited about this. This is very inclusive for artists. The Fine Arts Museum, the Railroad Museum, which we're so happy everybody's in this district and we can develop this way. The River Corridor, I can't even name everybody there, and this is bringing that together and giving opportunity. When I sit in my studio, we have the augmented reality murals. I don't know if you haven't seen them. If you have, check them out. But it's got a ticker of people coming from all over the country. And then they come into our studio, and I say, why are you here? And they say, you're hitting as a artful city. So I think doing this is going to validate that and help so much. The other thing, every day I have artists that need a space. They can afford to live and create in the same space, but they can't just buy a studio. They have that's a difficult time. And I think way back with RUDAC in the very beginning, they were saying we needed affordable spaces for artists. Developers follow the art community because they go in and buy not attractive places, and they make them beautiful, and it enhances. So I think you're really giving an opportunity to that. I'm excited. I own 2 buildings in this area, and I see it as a very big positive. And thank you for all your work, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ray Zapata.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here. And I wanted to echo everything the museum has been saying. I want to echo everything Steve Eustace has said. What our artist has said. We have been around for 60 years, lived as residents and done business there. All we're simply asking is some time. That's all. We're behind it all. We love it all. But there's a lot of people, the people that are here are the only ones that have been at the last 2 meetings. Some of us received notices and some of us didn't receive any notices. And so that concerns us. I know Tommy, I know Mr. Harry, I know Ms. Hesse. They represent our areas. And we need just a little bit more time to iron out. You can't go backwards and undo something that's legally put into place. There's a lot of residents. I've been a resident to this area. And I wonder how it's going to affect us tax-wise. Because there's a lot of low-income Hispanics, Mexican Americans that have lived in this whole area. And it's a great big area. So I want to just have some time. We want to have some time, not me. All of us want to have some time to be able to look at it and iron out any questions that we have. Aaron, you've done a great job. We've been there. And with that said, that's all I'm doing is echoing what we're asking for. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Mayor, I think we have several committee members that may have drank a lot of coffee this morning. Would it be appropriate to take a 5-minute bathroom break?
Yeah,
That concludes public comment for this item, so.
Okay, great.
We okay with that?
Yeah.
So let's
5
take
minutes.
a 5-minute break.
And sit down and get ready to continue with this meeting. All I've got to tell you, Steve, is they're healthy. Healthy snacks.
Okay, thanks for allowing us to take that break, Mayor. We'll go ahead and call.
Yeah, we all needed it.
We'll go ahead and, I guess, call the meeting back to order. And I think we've ended public comment, so close public comment and move to discussion amongst our committee. And we basically need to have a motion with a recommendation to either approve with modifications, or decline it. That will go to city council to discuss and vote on. So I would open it up for discussion amongst the group.
Well, I just want to say, I mean, it seems like from everybody that we've heard from today is very much in support of the idea behind this. But the concerns that we have heard are, we just need a little bit more time. And I guess I want to know, from sitting in this position, is giving those individuals and the art museum, you know, a couple more months to allow them to do whatever is necessary to research this. Is that going to be harmful to this process?
Things could happen.
Yes. I mean, the challenge is getting a meeting like this together, doing this meeting again. The struggle we have as staff is, it's been asked a number of times to give us specifics of what is problematic. That's why you have that packet on those are the ones that have come in, and there were very few specifics other than just opposed. And so it's hard to work if you don't know what they're opposed to. We did work through the intermodal container items. We have heard over the last 2 weeks about the protection for residential. And so we've brought forward a proposal to help protect those two residential areas a little more. Beyond that, we're just not sure what is still left to work towards or on. I understand losing zoning from light manufacturing and heavy commercial, but I, again, go back to our full purpose of this area is we're trying to protect our heritage and cultural areas, and light manufacturing and heavy commercial are not congruent or alignment with those areas. So I don't know that we would change our recommendation to Planning Commission and/or City Council from that stance, but again, 2 more months, I'm not sure what would change in 2 months. We sent over 500 notices for the 2 town halls. We had 2 town halls, and they were attended by different people. Some were the same, but there were also different people. The museum we were able to use their space, a local space in the neighborhood. So I'm not sure what would change in the 2 months from changing the regulations that are presented today.
Now, this has been quite a few years, and again, kind of going back and referencing the map. When we did the CBD district originally, there were some businesses that I brought that concerned me. Palmer's was one of them. Hartman Roofing was over there. And we kind of gave a few of those businesses the option of being included or not. I mean, have we done the same thing? Because you know, I think Angelo Glass is over in this area. There's a roofing company, and then multiple other businesses kind of going down near the rail line there.
Both of those that you mentioned are allowable under the office warehouse, so there's no change that would happen to them. Just like roofing companies, those are contractor yards. Okay. He has an office, he has a yard, he has a warehouse that fits under our office warehouse. The Angelo Glass.
It minimizes the amount of outdoor storage, correct?
It does over time. In fact, I think the roofing company is already screened, so they're doing a good job of what they're trying to do for the area. Okay. And again, nothing would change unless they made a change on their site that triggers a development review.
Okay. And then in the packet of opposition that we received, there were quite a few comments in regards to Russ Street and traffic of vehicles. Can we just discuss that so the public can hear a little bit as well?
Yes, there was a question at the last town hall meeting about commercial traffic in the area. And so we researched that, and under our ordinances currently that operations handles, there are certain rules about commercial traffic. The rules allow commercial traffic to come into these areas, stop, unload, reload, do all of those types of things, just like down Chadburn, if you will, for people that are doing business there. We do not have, this overlay does not change any of those traffic rules. They would not prevent anyone from parking on their property in the manner that they're doing now with heavier vehicles, box trucks, those types of things. So we researched it. It does not prohibit what the individual that was asking the question that has a property on Rush Street. Can he still get commercial vehicles there? Yes, he can.
And then, sorry to steal the stage, just one additional question that Steve Eustace brought up. He had mentioned the marketing time for commercial properties is typically 1 to 5 years. We all know there's so many vacant properties in our downtown district. When I believe one of the slides had mentioned if the building was vacant for 2 years, and I apologize because I cannot fully remember what the slide had mentioned. How has that been addressed? Has Steve been able to talk to you guys about just commercial marketing so we have an understanding on that aspect as well for personal property rights?
So currently, our ordinances, there's 2 areas. One is the building code, and so building use of that structure gives 2 years vacancy before you have to change your occupancy, which means under the building code, you may have to come up to certain code regulations. Under the zoning ordinance in sections 604, we have the non-conforming land use. It actually only gives you 12 months and always has since 2000. What we're doing here is watering that down. We're saying every property gets 2 years. So this district actually is being watered down from the rest of the community that only has 12 months. If they have a vacant property and the land use changes, we're talking land use, not building use, the land use changes, they have to come forward to Planning Commission and or City Council to change something. We're going to allow 2 full years that you don't have to come to us for that in this district. So it's a relaxation of those rules.
So if a building was being used for storage and not necessarily operating a full business out of, what happens with that building?
It would stay under the building code, a storage occupancy, and under the zoning code, it would be a warehouse land use.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a few things, I guess, just to mention, and I guess I'll start first with probably my biggest concern with the proposal is the subjectivity in the approval. And I think we have 4 or 5 items that any of those could be utilized to determine whether or not the property is compliant with the requirements of the district. And the reason I say I'm concerned with that is just the fact that, I mean, what's written in the ordinance is what's really important. And I think when that comes up again, none of us may be here. We may all know exactly what we want it to look like, but if it's written so subjectively that it's just kind of up to whoever happens to wake up on, or depending on what side of the bed they wake up on that day, then I don't think that's beneficial. At the same time, I think it's important to have a balance, because the whole idea behind a cultural and artistic district is that it be eclectic and unique, and that there's some flexibility in those things. So I'm doing what most people do right now, Aaron, is just pointing out the problems and not offering any type of solution. But I would like to see that maybe refined or further delineated to where it's truly easier on staff to determine, and developers, and also to just promote the consistency and expectations of what can and can't be in that area.
Chairman, are
Go
you
ahead.
talking about land use, design? What exactly are you?
Design, I think, and I can't remember what slide that was on. I tried to find it. But basically, we had, the five, I think there were 4 or 5 options in one of your slides. That was to conform with the historic overlay was one of them. So I don't know if you want to pull that back up, but.
Yeah, I can.
And it, right. Yeah.
So this was, as you can see where I underlined it, meet one or more of the following. There was concerns that the River Corridor Master Development Plan from 2006 was a little dated. And so we looked at the rest of our items that we allow for design standards in our downtown district and our historic district and historic overlays. And we also have these items within our policies. And so we brought them forward as here are some alternative items that people can meet so it stays flexible. Because I believe the concern was if you own a building from the 60s, 70s, or 80s, do I have to turn it historical? And the answer is no. We are able to keep it the way it is. The items that go through DHRC are major reconstruction, major remodel. The minor things, signage, paint color, doing some few things on the outside, changing like for like, that's all done administratively and within a 10-day period so that the property owner can move forward. Again, we're exempting the single-family, two-family residential, so it's really just impacting any commercial ventures at that time. And with this slide, you can see where the areas are already that are hatched and under the green, they're already under those same rules right now. And so you're just adding some other areas, the Paseo is what the Paseo is. There's some warehousing over there just north of the fort, and then you come down Washington and Highland where they've already done a lot of good work on a lot of those structures and been working on them to make them more inviting. So I don't think we're going above and beyond with our design criteria and trying to stay flexible. And so that's that balance, as you say, what's flexible and what's predictable.
Yeah. I think the other thing to me that I just want to make the point, I guess, is that, I think this is an exciting opportunity for our community, and I think it's something that could really benefit this whole area and downtown. And I think in listening to some of the public comment, I just think it's important that we have neighborhood buy-in, because I think with everybody on board with this and fully committed to it, it will be, much more successful and, could gain a lot more momentum that way. So I know that you guys did a lot of outreach in the town halls and everything, but I just want to be cognizant of making sure that, especially the neighborhoods that are being affected, understand exactly what's happening and what's going on with their property. And so I think with some of the options that you provided, as far as providing some additional protection to the residential areas, I think that's really helpful. I think it gives them a little bit more time to fully understand and for, hopefully those areas around them to redevelop in a lesser intense use than what they're currently allowed to do and, improve their neighborhoods. And so anyway, I just think it's important to, that we be aware that we're affecting their properties. That's all I have.
I would just like to say so many asked in our open discussion for more time, mainly not because the plan has that many problems. I didn't hear a lot of that, but more about not knowing and needed time to study, look at it. How does it fit with my individual, or like the Museum of Fine Arts? That's a large project, and they asked for the 2 months specifically. And so I'm of the opinion if we have that many that need more assurance on the plan, want to study it because they didn't know any of this was going on, and I'm sorry about that. Time has been spent on these things, but I do feel that if we're going to be successful, as Luke said, maybe getting a buy-in is an important factor as well.
No, sir, it would not. Public comment's over at this time.
Patrick, do you have anything?
So the only thing I would say is I'm kind of with the same mindset as Candy, where I agree with everything that we're kind of talking about and the way that we want to preserve the residential areas. I think that's really important. I also agree with the way the plan is going to shape that area. I think it all sounds really good. And it sounds like there's a lot of buy-in from the people who are here as well. But as was mentioned, a lot of them do feel like they could benefit from an additional 2 months of looking over the information. And I'm of the mindset, like if we were working at it for 10 years, that's a long time to put effort into it. What's another 2 months? And I know things could change. I do understand that. I think we've seen a lot of change, that can happen rather quickly. But I am still of the mindset that I would rather give the people 2 more months to be able to really feel invested in what we're trying to do with the city. And that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I think just a general question to my colleagues would be, if we did, let's say, provide 2 more months, what are we expecting staff to do with the citizens or business owners in that 2 months? I mean, obviously, everyone's got some general questions. I do think that staff did a very good job outlining the general purpose and the reason behind all of this. So I don't know, Aaron, if we had separate meetings with some of the business owners, some of the residents, can we really amend much of what you've presented?
Well, it would take another notice to come to city council and ask for a joint meeting and an alternative notice process. Then schedule that meeting out, whatever that date would be. And the question is, how do we do our town halls? We did, as a courtesy, sent letters to over 450 plus property owners in the area twice. And so that always goes to property owners that are updated on the Tom Green County Appraisal District. And so that's a very high cost for us to continue to do. We're happy to do it if that's necessary to move it forward. But again, I don't know how much of the actual language is going to change unless there's some different desire, or you all have strong direction to change language from this group moving forward.
So really, in actuality, the 2 months wouldn't be 2 months. It would be 2 months of citizens being able to digest, and probably 4 to 6 months before we can rejoin together and make a decision.
It is very possible that it would be drawn out more than 2 months.
Sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
you're fine. But I think when it came down to the timing of requesting the timing, it was mainly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the museum or the SAMPA that's trying to make sure that they would stay within their same eligibility. So
I think, to your point, and Aaron, you mentioned earlier, if there were questions about specific issues in the ordinance as it's been presented, I think I could support and get on board with adding additional time to consider it. I just, to your point, I don't know what's going to change other than time. I think, there's been a great deal of time and input from the community put into this up to this point. And there's been a lot of negotiation and concessions made. And personally, my biggest concern is the residential areas I've mentioned several times, and I think that's been addressed. So that's kind of where I'm at on the delay. I don't know what it's going to accomplish, honestly. I mean, I think everyone seems to be supportive of it. So if there were specific questions, I would.
Luke, if I may, before you vote, Planning Commission, if you push
Mr.
this
Thomas?
2, 3,
Oh, wait.
4 months.
I'm sorry.
Harry, he says you can't speak
just-
right
Okay.
now.
Well, it's just because the law requires that Planning Commission make a recommendation to council, I think it's very important just to allow them to have that time to deliberate without council input, if we may.
Comment I was going to make is you're going to have 4 new people up here in 2 months.
Yep, understand.
Karen, can you pull the map back up that shows the zoning, please? So there's a pink area up, it's on Oak Street. It's right across from the Museum of Fine Arts, correct?
Yes, sir.
So how would this change that property? Or those properties?
Right now, that area is CGCH, and so it would essentially take away the heavy commercial uses. Most of those are operating as office warehouses right now. There's an electrical company, a few of them are just simply warehouses. So we don't think it would change significantly.
But what's under heavy commercial that could move in there if we left it, if we didn't do anything?
If we left it, you could do large truck sales, like 18-wheelers, dump trucks. You could go and move those in there. Now, those lots are probably not big enough for that to make sense. You could do.
But it could go in there.
It could go in there. You could do automotive body repair, like auto body parts, and do that. That's a heavier, intense body, spray painting and those kinds of things. And again, those are directly adjacent to residential right now, and they've been that way since 2000, for 25 years.
But what we would do was take that away to where they could do the heavy commercial, correct?
Correct. They would be able to do a general commercial, an office warehouse, or a neighborhood commercial use there.
So it better preserves that and protects it from the heavy commercial, correct?
Correct.
And just across the way, where it says Love Municipal Pool, we have commercial.
Yes,
right to
that's
the
under
left of that.
that's
The same way, and that's a vacant
Fine
lot.
Arts Museum, and then the River Stage area, yes.
That we could have heavy commercial in there if we leave it alone.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly.
Yes, sir.
I thought that's what I understood, but, so if we don't do anything, we leave it open to a lot of stuff, especially right there beside the Museum of Fine
It
Arts.
continues to operate as it is today, and we don't provide those protections moving forward.
So, again, we need to make a recommendation to City Council of whether to approve with modifications, or to decline to do anything. So I would entertain a motion from the committee.
Can I ask one more question? Aaron, earlier you spoke to, I believe, one of the concerns of the museum, and I'm not going to get this right, as far as the powers that they must fall within their alignment. The concern was that this particular plan might not be in accordance with that. But you spoke to, that was kind of something that you guys was a consideration in this. Can you just kind of reiterate what you said earlier?
Yes, when we spoke with the Texas Commission on the Arts, San Angelo, through the Fine Arts Museum, has a cultural district that they applied for and is designated, slightly different boundaries. When talking through, and we sent them the information on this, they looked through it, there is nothing that is contradictory and would impact their district. They continue to be able to operate their district, do their recertification. I think they do it every 10 years. I'm not sure where they're at in that cycle. But it would not impact their standing as a cultural district for San Angelo under the Texas Commission of the Arts. This being a zoning overlay, this is just really the slide. Now, the two things that we've discussed is one, under the establishment paragraph, is striking out that last sentence that talked about underlying zoning. So I'd ask that if you have a motion, you would make that. The second item is how do we handle the RS1 and RS2 areas? Do we keep them RS1, RS2? And if we do, then I would also ask you make a decision on the short-term rentals in those two areas. Say they follow the residential short-term rental rules or they follow the commercial.
One again about what exactly needed to be struck there? Apologize.
Under the establishment paragraph, there's a sentence to strike through that talks about underlying zoning. We're striking that sentence as it does not apply. And then the other would be on making a decision on the RS1 area up here off of Baker and the RS2 area between Avenue A and the alleyway of Avenue D.
Okay, so again, are we leaving them RS1 and RS2, or are we moving them to RM1, correct?
That is the question.
Okay, I just want to make sure our brain's on the same board.
So just to hit this again, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but on the difference between those two options, so leaving them RS1 versus going RM1, STRs are allowed by right.
Correct.
If we kept the same residential zoning in place as it is today, they would be subject to all the restrictions of STRs as they are in any other neighborhood.
Okay.
So 500 feet, all the other requirements.
That is correct.
And then under RM1, could Brenda have her beauty shop in?
No.
No, okay. Okay, just
She needs it, but she can't have it.
Wheels are turning.
Joe, can you go ahead and make a motion?
On the spot.
Brittany was getting all
Hi,
prepared for
I'm
it.
trying. As I mentioned in my previous statement, I truly don't know by delaying this what actually will be changed. I understand it will give people an understanding of what's being proposed, but ultimately what is actually going to be changed by city staff.
Brittany, I'm sorry, hold on.
Sorry.
1 second. Brandon, this will come back to city council for a final reading, right?
Correct.
Yeah, today's
Yeah.
just first reading, there will be a second reading.
Right,
after
so
this.
there would be somewhat of a bit of time for people to understand exactly what's been approved.
Yeah, and they could make public comment on it at the next meeting.
So it can be pulled and discussed further.
What's that time period?
Yeah, what is the time period between
2 weeks.
this joint, two more weeks?
Well, it's really 3 because the way the calendar falls, so you'd actually be a 3-week window.
You want to clarify that?
Okay, well, might be the not favored person today, but I am going to make a motion to move forward with staff's recommendation under the establishment paragraph, removing the underlining zoning portion of that. As far as how we handle RS1 and RS2, I personally believe that, especially over in the Baker area, in past meetings, we've had a lot of interest in some abandoned homes or whatnot in order to turn those into STRs. I think that's a great little neighborhood to be able to do that in. So I would be in favor of rezoning our RS1 and RS2 to the RM1 zoning, allowing short-term rental usage. Did I do okay?
Motion from Brittany. Does anybody have a second?
A second.
Have a motion and a second. I'll call a vote. All those in favor of Brittany's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that motion passes.
Thank you, Chairman, and now Mayor, that recommendation is to you with a 7-0 vote, with the alterations of striking the statement in the establishment paragraph for underlying zoning. The RS1 and RS2 zoning districts would still stay residential, but they would be raised to RM1, allowing short-term rentals by right.
I'm not going to try to repeat that myself, so I hope everyone was listening and understood everything that Aaron and Brittany said, because it's, what they said is one and the same. That's what we will be considering today as a city council. And it is now an opportunity for this city council to make a motion for approval.
Clarification first. We had a statement maybe 2 hours ago that said that we were not going to allow commercial in RS1 and RS2. If we're going to change it to RM2, does that mean commercial by right can go in there?
No, it cannot. It is a residential district. It only allows single-family structures, two-family structures, and low-rise family structures. It
So I
does not
can't
allow
do
commercial.
hair. That's bottom line is I can't do hair.
Well, then I make the motion that the Planning Commission made to approve this, striking the one sentence and moving RS1, RS2 to the RM2 qualifications. RM1.
That's why I said, we'll just take what they said,
Okay.
so we get it right. Is there a second?
Ma'am? It's obvious, the cards are on the table. I think we know how everybody feels about this.
No,
And-
Larry, no, not yet. I'm
Okay.
asking for a second. I'll second it. So there's a motion and a second to Brittany's motion, and the Planning Commission's passing 7-0. Now, if you'd like to make a comment, you may do so now.
Again, the cards are on the table. It's also an imperative that we get this thing done. I understand that. But there's a community of people out there that I don't know that they had an opportunity to voice their opinions as this planning was going on. I know it's been 10 years, that's a long time, but I don't feel as though we should rush now to the finish line without doing it properly.
We have a history of not attending town hall meetings. We can have a lot of them. We announce a lot of them. We send how many notices? How many?
Over 450 for this area, twice.
Any other comment from council?
I'll go
Wait.
back and say what I said a little while ago. You push this 2 months, there's 4 new people up here in the council. Those individuals are going to have to be educated. And so this probably will be 6 to 8 months before it could ever pass up here. I'm not suggesting that you can't wait, but the bottom line is those people need the opportunity to understand what this is all about too.
And a lot can happen.
I have a comment.
Yes, Lucy.
I would like to say, I've heard it, I've supported as well, like everyone else, but I do believe that when our constituents come to us and say, we want more time, and it's not anything that we have to have a rush on. One thing that I need to ask you, Aaron, if someone came and wanted to do something in this area, would they be approved right away, or would you put them on hold till we made a decision?
Well, the ordinance doesn't take effect until the second reading, until it's finally law, and so it would have to be law at that time. So in between this meeting and the next meeting, of course, discussions can go on. If there's an opportunity or an item that needs to be revisited, staff can make that request, or a citizen might be able to make that request through that portion of the next meeting and consideration for city council at that time. But this does not go into effect as law until the second reading is voted on.
Okay. I would just like to say that, again, going back to what the people in this room today took the time to get up and come and ask us, and I know that we all have a life and we all get busy and we can't take off to go to a town hall meeting, and hear what's going on. But it was pretty evident when I asked what the reaction was at the town hall meeting. And then I hear these people that are coming up going, we want more time. And I don't see any reason why not give them the time. It isn't going to make that much difference. Aside that we have to do this, we have to do that, that there's going to be 4 new people up here, that's our job. And for that reason alone, I will be voting no.
But they have 3 weeks
Thank
between
you.
now and the second reading, right? So additional questions. And I
Yes,
think the
ma'am.
big issue is, given time on all of this, Aaron kept asking for questions. What's your issue? What's the problem? What's your challenges? What's your concern? And nothing came out. And that's one of the greatest concerns, is time doesn't always resolve if you don't come forward and bring forward your questions and concerns. And I think sometimes hesitation can create a scenario that's not positive and can create problems down the road. Just my personal opinion. So with that, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, so there's a motion and the second. We will take a vote. All those in favor of the motion on the floor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye. So it's 3-3. So what do we do on a tie?
You could entertain another motion, but that one doesn't pass.
So is there another motion that someone who said nay would like to bring forward?
Brandon, can we entertain the same motion with a hard stop on the time limit that the public has to question and educate themselves?
Well, Karen, we have 3 weeks between now and the next meeting. So you have 3 weeks. It can be pulled from public comment, pulled from the consent agenda at that point in time, and those questions can come back up again and be discussed. Correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're suggesting you would pass it today, and then I'm not clear on.
The only person that had a specific time request was Bree, if I recall correctly. I think I'm asking, can we pass it with that specific time request honored? It shouldn't go on indefinitely. For those who don't know, I did work on the task force, and I am in favor of this. And I would like to vote yes today, but I also agree with the voices in the room, Candy and others who have pointed out that our job is to serve the community and be their advocates, and they have asked for this. Now, it bears repeating that Aaron sent out 450 notifications twice. So I'm not sure what more we can do. I'm willing to do it in a very short period of time. Perhaps the mayor's right. Perhaps 3 weeks is what we allow. I'm just asking the question, excuse me, if that's worth doing or matters much. I think a lot of SAMHSA's questions and concerns have been addressed. Is that correct?
Yes, I think talking with the Texas Commission on the Arts, that resolve those issues about the separate districts, if you will. We believe it has. We've looked into it extensively. The Texas Commission on the Arts has the information, and looking at the government code, it talks about how to establish a district, which our Fine Arts Museum has done through the Texas Commission on the Arts as their district. What we are getting hung up on is the naming of the district. If we had named this the Heritage District, there would never be a question between what's going on. But we have had a cultural district for a long time, and we decided this is the expansion of what's called a cultural district, which is a zoning overlay and a design district. Does not impact their fine arts, their Texas Commission on the Arts cultural district in any way.
So at this point,
Mayor?
yes, Tommy?
Let me make a comment. With a 3-3 vote, what that means is, or another thing that means is, it's delayed for 3 more weeks until we have the 7th council member back. So you got 3 weeks either way.
Well,
No.
yeah, so by doing this joint meeting, we didn't have to send statutory notices out to all the affected properties. Now, Aaron already did that as a courtesy for those town hall meetings, but having this joint meeting makes it where we don't have to do that. We publish the notice. If you're suggesting that now that Planning Commission has voted, but then you take it up separately for a hearing, I think we probably would have to send out notices to do that because of the joint meeting is what gets us around that.
Okay.
May I ask if I go back to council and ask for another vote, that we take another vote? We have a motion and a second. We take another vote with the idea that it can be pulled from the consent agenda next go-around and brought up any additional questions or concerns people have and bring back as a vote. Can we do that? Karen, you want to make that motion to do that? Just like I said it?
So I got hang on, a procedural question, Brandon. Can we vote on the very same thing again? The very same motion that was made, is that a Robert's Rules of Order thing? Can you vote on the very same motion again just because it didn't pass?
I mean, if you've considered new, or had new consideration, yeah, I think you can. I don't know what the condition still is going to be as far as the next meeting. I mean, that's always allowed for council to pull something off consent agenda and, take it up in a public hearing. So that's not changing.
Brandon, if we have a situation at this point, if this item is actually approved by council, and there's 3 weeks in between where, meetings can be had with individuals that had questions, at the next meeting, 3 weeks from now, if we had enough concern from the visitors that came and talked to Aaron, we could very easily say, that second one, say, you know what, we're going to deny it after having it approved this time, right?
Yeah.
So it'll give us an opportunity, really, the 3 weeks to have those questions answered. And if anything, if the item is pulled, it can be denied at that point. Is that
That's
correct?
right. And I think if there were changes that would bring it up to the level of like requiring notice, like say the vape issue we talked about. I said, that falls out of line. We would have to notice that. If it's something like that, we're not going to be able to pass it anyways without redoing the notices. So I would only expect on the second reading, if we've talked with citizens, very minor changes that wouldn't rise to that level of additional notice.
But at this point, it would require basically an approval to get us to the next
Right.
meeting, and at that point,
Yes,
then,
sir.
okay.
So what do you need from me? So do I go out and ask for council to make the same motion and ask for a second after consideration of the questions that Karen just raised?
Yeah, I think it'd be appropriate to entertain a new motion.
Okay, so Harry, do you want to make that motion?
Whatever we just said, I'll make that.
Yeah. And I'll second that same motion. So with that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of passing this motion? About what? The same motion,
Original one?
correct.
3
3-week time
weeks.
frame, and then the ability to pull it from the consent agenda and vote again. Yeah. So we have a motion, we have a second, we'll take a vote. Tommy? Harry?
Yes.
Lucy?
Nay.
Karen? Yes. Larry? Brenda? 4-1. 4-2, sorry. 5-1. 5-1. I
And
can't
Mayor,
count today, but the final vote is 5-1.
the city clerk suggested we just, on the next meeting, just have it on a regular agenda anyways.
Then we don't have to pull it.
So
We'll do that.
Okay. So the motion passes 5-1. Now, we're not through, because now we're going to go to 3B. Just when you thought you could leave. 3B is first reading and public hearing of ordinances amending the following provisions of the City Code of Ordinances related to signs. 1, Chapter 12, Planning and Development, Article 12.04, Signs, and 2, Chapter 12, Planning and Development, Exhibit A, zoning ordinance, Article 4, specific use standards by deleting Section 420, off-site signs. And Aaron, lucky you, you're on again.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chairman of Planning Commission and City Council members. This is amendments to the sign ordinance. Our primary goal and purpose is to alleviate the moratorium that's been on off-site signs due to some court cases since 2020. Those have been resolved, and it has come time for our community to have a definition of what is a billboard as opposed to an off-site sign. You can see our purposes here, that we know that billboards are important and are impactful to our community. We know that heights of sign using classification of roadways allows for better transitions, meaning that heights of signs don't change drastically over some of the zoning districts where we allow it to be by street classification. And then we also realize being reasonable with sign regulations can assist small businesses and regional businesses and continue to draw customers to bolster our community. So off-site signs is no longer being used. It is now a billboard definition. Billboards are classified as a freestanding sign over 250 square feet in size. Billboards can either be static or electronic. Static billboards have a height by road classification, which you'll see on a slide in just a few minutes, based on if they're on a local road, a collector, an arterial, or a freeway. They should be from 125 feet from a residential district boundary line, and that's specific to district boundary line, not just residential use. And then a 500-foot separation buffer from another billboard on the same side of the roadway. These are all fairly standard dimensions, and even when we get to the height, we've adopted some of the TxDOT classifications for signs and billboards because they are standard, and we have a lot of TxDOT roads in town, and we're trying to streamline our signs so that when the city approves something and TxDOT approves something, they're not in conflict. This is the map that shows where billboards can be based on the road classifications. So if you look at the corridors in pink, those are the billboard corridors. And then there are other areas, as you can see right up here off of Pulliam. You can see 2 billboards have been issued, and that's based on their zoning classification. And so the zoning classification can be heavy manufacturing, light manufacturing, I just lost my brain, office warehouse, and heavy commercial. And so, again, that's part of the reasons why we're looking at those zoning districts to say, where is it appropriate for billboards? So we're not changing any locations of where billboards can go. We're just changing the definition. We're making sure that the distances and the heights are consistent throughout our community. So electronic message boards are a subcategory of either a freestanding or a roof sign or a wall sign. Again, they'll be by height, by road classification. Electronic message billboards should be away 125 feet from a residential district boundary line. That does not prohibit them in residential districts. It just says they should be a certain distance away. So like our schools and our churches that have electronic message boards, or they want to convert to electronic message boards, they are allowed to do that. We just basically say what size they can when they get there. Electronic message, this is billboards, I apologize. Billboards, no more than 1 panel per side, so you can't have all 4 panels being electronic message. You can only have 1 on one side and 1 on the other. If you have 4 panels, you can only have 1 on each side that's electronic. Talking with the industry, all of those do come with dimming capability, and it's just a matter of programming them to dim them in the evening, as well as the same as when electronic messages come across the billboards themselves. So this was where the electronic signs are, under 75 square feet, so that's a pretty good size. Again, the same transitions from there same as the illumination, if you will. The nits is an illumination, trying to dim it down after daylight hours, particularly if you're around a residential area. Sign height. So if you recall back to our lots of zoning classifications between Abe and Cohenheim, each one of those zoning classifications has a different sign height. And that can be very challenging as a driver going through there and trying to pick out signs, where this would standardize on the road classification. So if you're a local road or collector street, have a maximum height of 25 feet. If you're an arterial street, you'd have a maximum height of 45 feet. And freeways and designated U.S. highways is 50 feet. And those designations match the TxDOT designations for height for those things. And so we're trying to stay consistent with that so that if folks are looking to do things, and of course we have TxDOT roads that come in, while we can have a more strict height, it just doesn't seem to make sense for our community at this time. Why don't we go ahead and utilize something that they know they're going to get approved at TxDOT? Because probably they've already been to TxDOT and maybe have gotten it approved. So we're trying to stay consistent with that. Our overlay districts, again, we talked about that just a little bit. No freestanding sign shall exceed 30 feet in height or 75 square feet and set forth in the regulations. Billboards are prohibited, and in no case shall a variance be allowed. Electronic message signs are limited to 15 square feet, prohibited in no case shall such a sign be in the historic district, historic overlay properties. The 3x5, which is 15 square feet, we looked at a number of our churches in our historic district that have those, as well as Fort Concho Elementary, and that is a pretty standard size for them to do their electronic messaging on. And we do say that all banners require an approval from Design and Historic Review Commission or their designee. Based on our banner size, those can all be done administratively so that we can turn those around very quickly. And banners are items that are secured to a structural wall or a fence, as opposed to banners that may be on, say, an A-frame that turns into a temporary sign, and that's different. They still have to be reviewed by Design and Historic Review, but they fall under a different category. I talked really fast on that, so I know you may have some questions, Planning Commission and City Council, but let me get to my recommendation and then we'll have some discussion. So my recommendation is to have approval of Article 12.04, signs and amending the sign ordinance and amending Section 420 of the zoning ordinance, and eliminating that section and leaving it in reserve. Through the discussions, through our town hall meetings with the sign ordinance folks, with the industry, even with our committee, we think that there is an opportunity to continue the discussion about portable signs, temporary signs, and sign permit fees, continue that discussion to bring back some recommendations in the future. Not putting a timeline on it, but us to keep doing that, because in those meetings, it was very clear that the sign industry that shows up, they're fine with having ordinance or rules. They want to know what they are. They want to do it right. But they say there's some conflicts in there of, well, you can have a portable sign that's the same size as a temporary sign, and I've got to pay a permit, but this one doesn't have to pay a permit. And I think we need to look at those to make sure that we're making sense all the way across the board so that we're not hindering one industry or skewing to one type of sign or the other. How do we really want this to work? As well as look at our sign permit fees, which in our budget cycle, we do that periodically. And they did ask, the sign industry said, we need to look at those, and we're happy to look at those. And so that's really just kind of from a staff request, just getting that direction or feedback saying, yes, please continue looking and working. We're not going to set necessarily a timeline to say we got to come back in 6 months, but we want to continue working with that industry and that group to make sure that we're helping our community. The sign industry cares about what our community looks like. They really do. We heard that loud and clear at the town halls. They're concerned about the folks that just aren't simply doing it. They're not coming for permits. They're just going and putting things up. Sometimes it's business owners that just don't know that there are sign regulations, and they buy something off of a website and go and place it. And so I think it gives us some opportunity as staff to help educate our community about what really is, what constitutes a sign, where it should be, and how big. So with that, I turn it over to you, Luke, for you guys to ask me any questions from the Planning Commission side, and then.
So just to clarify, you're not asking for a specific recommendation or making a recommendation on portable versus temporary. We just want to.
Correct. We did not change any of that ordinance language in the ordinance. It stays the same. We only changed those items for billboards, electronic message signs, and electronic billboards.
Can I just ask that we warm this facility up a bit? We are freezing. It's hard to concentrate when you're shaking. So if we could just warm this room up a bit, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yes.
Sorry for interruption, but we're
No, you're
freezing.
good.
Aaron,
I was gonna hit just the highlights to recap everything as I caught it. So basically, what we're proposing is to remove off-site definition,
Yes.
fine billboards of anything 250 square feet or over. The, I guess, prohibition on residential, non-residential school districts and churches are allowed. And height is no longer going to be based on zoning district, which I think makes some sense as we just looked at. There's some zoning districts that attach to
Yeah.
makes it really odd to have, you know, basically two signs next to each other. One can only be so high, the other 25 feet higher.
Correct.
But-
That is the gist of it, yes, sir. And I do say we had a great committee that worked, and the industry helped us a lot. We actually, one of the industry folks, Doug Cooper, actually helped me a lot on the billboards. I think he's here to speak today, so I just want to say my appreciation to him and the sign committee. Signs are very challenging. They're always a can of worms when you open them up, and we tried to keep the lid on as much as we could just to solve what we needed to solve, and I really appreciate everybody's effort on it.
Thank y'all for reaching out and getting the experts involved that
Yes.
deal with this. Other communities, so we can be.
Okay, this might be a silly question, but for instance, on a gas station, if they've got the gas prices highlighted and then underneath have, you know, a rotating sign, is that 2 plus their name or?
No,
is
the
that
pricing is not an
not
actual
included?
sign. It's
Okay.
only really if they're advertising their location, if you will. They say, you know, this business here, and then it depends on whether it's a freestanding sign, a wall sign, a roof sign, and there's certain allowances per linear footage. We're not changing any of those things.
Okay.
And so they're still the same as they've always been.
Okay, and then as far as current billboards, they would be grandfathered in unless destroyed, damaged, something?
That is correct, but
Unless the train did it.
I would say non-conforming
Okay.
as opposed to grandfathered, but
Okay.
that's what I would say.
Perfect. And then last one, this was, oh my goodness, it might have been a year and a half ago, the Quick Kent that went up on North Bryant. We had a lot of debate and discussion in that meeting based on, I believe, the sign size. Has the sign size changed since then, or was it because they had Quick Kent, Huddle House, and then the other underneath it?
Are you talking about the one at the far north of town?
Yeah, North Bryant. Mhm.
I'm trying to think of that, but I
Yeah.
think it had to do with sign size and
okay.
the linear footage of their frontage.
Okay.
So
Got it.
0 to 199, you can have one freestanding sign. If you're over that, you can have two, and then there's increments in there.
But the new proposal,
It does not change any of those dimensions or
Got it.
distances.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Do they have any?
You, I'll keep my mouth shut for a minute. I know you'll be happy. So it's in your hands to go ahead and take a motion.
Have public comment on this?
I believe we have some, yes.
Yes. Monica Ramos?
All right, I'm back. I don't know if my comment will actually fall into place with this, since the additional requests are kind of more to the concerns that I was going to raise. I did serve on this sign committee, and the concerns that we had were, or that I have personally, was the flags and the banners as far as how long they can be up. I understand that there was some concerns at the town hall meeting about being supportive of small businesses. However, I think the time frame that we've allotted is conducive for a small business to have a temporary sign, but then have the funds to have a nicer sign in place. I know I'm a little biased with downtown, but in terms of thinking of all of San Angelo, the congestion of seeing so many banners or bow flags, which those are kind of popular right now, and having that limited signage is something that we do need to look at and take into consideration. So again, not sure my comments actually are for right now. It might be for those additional requests that we discussed, but thank you.
You might ask, define a banner. What's the size, what's the scope? Because we put up banners that say this historic building was or is, that's a banner. But we need a better, I think, Luke, I don't know, but I think we just need clarification on what various banners
that
and
would
what
be
they
helpful.
are.
And I think there's a lot of discussion around that, and it kind of leads over into portable and temporary as
Yeah.
well.
And so really, in our definitions that have been there, put my glasses on so I can read, a piece of cloth, paper, plastic, or other non-rigid material upon which a message is painted, printed, or affixed. And then there's a section that talks about where banners are allowed and what their sizes are. And so I think that is for further discussion so that we can narrow down what that really means in scope so that our community understands that as well. So when we talk about flags, like American flag and Texas flag, those things are allowed. Then we're talking about those flags that you used to see at like maybe automotive sales places, or you see the one that kind of comes up and curves over. That's called a bow flag or a feather flag. We see a lot of those. The real challenge is, are those temporary? Most of them end up in the right-of-way, which is not allowed by any sign, unless it's a state or city sign that should be there. And so those are the challenges that we have forward, but I do think that's more of an education issue, and our sign industry is they want to be helpful in that manner. And so I think that's why having the future discussions with them to find out, well, what is the best way to communicate with our business owners and other sign companies that may not be aware of what the rule regulations are, how do we all work together? Other questions for city staff?
Well, I don't know.
I forgot to push the thing.
No.
Is that the mayor's discretion?
Susan Mertz.
May I defer and have Fast Science go first, please?
Okay. Michael Martinez.
Morning, Council.
Good morning.
I'm Michael Martinez. I'm with Fast Signs, and we've been in the business for almost 20 years, myself individually, us is 13. We're fortunate. We sell a bunch of electronic message centers, and we've done it for quite a while. The one thing that I would ask that you guys do is protect the investment of those that they've already made the investment, as well as those that are looking at making a substantial investment. Everything about what you guys are amending is great, except the 8-second hold. There's a difference between video, animation, and static, and I would look that we make that definition between animation and video, make that very clear what that is, because most people go and get an electronic message center for the fact of being able to capture someone's attention and deviate from someone else. We do have a lot of challenges as we drive our vehicles. We've all, as a society, learned to navigate that. So I would love to sit down and talk to folks about what animation is versus video. And we can do that. The other thing that he kind of talked about were city permits. We're all for city permitting, but we all do want to get on a regular playing field. It is very difficult. We're fortunate we work throughout all the state of Texas, so we're very, very knowledgeable in other city ordinances. And policing is probably one of the biggest things that we see in San Angelo that we do not do a very good job of. Essentially, us citizens have to police ourselves. And I will tell you, for one, I will never turn in another business for messing up. Just won't do it. It doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong, but the fact is we pay a fee. We should find some sort of policing. We actually took a client in Brown County, which is Round Rock. We put up a temporary banner for them. We had 30 days to build a new signage for them. On the 31st day, the Brown County called and asked when that banner's coming down. It was a $50 fine for every single day it was up. So, like I said, just to be on an equal playing field when it comes to the permitting. And but everything else, like I said, looks great. It conforms with a lot of what you see throughout the state. But just protect the investment of those electric message centers because they're not cheap. Those businesses are making a substantial investment in the community. They do use a lot of those message centers to give to 501(c)(3)s, nonprofits, or just give recognition to students throughout the county that do deserve some recognition. So, like I said, that's my only request, that we really look at that before we accept it. Thank you.
Susan Mertz.
My name is Susan Mertz, and I believe that this new sign ordinance has been well developed by city planning. I also sat on the group that worked on this. But I do have a concern. Section 12.04.005, sign regulations, Section 3C2, where prohibited.
Say those numbers all over again.
I know. I just want to make
Like-
sure. Would you please consider adding the Knickerbocker corridor into that area where signs are prohibited? The reason I'm asking this is because it was in the ordinance originally and was taken out by John James. One of my concerns is that Knickerbocker is a visual corridor that is taken in by Red Arroyo, ASU, the football stadium, and the Shannon Medical Center, where a proliferation of new signs in the non-residential areas will occur with this new ordinance. A particular concern is the area beginning at the Red Arroyo, where there already is a billboard there at Schertz, to the neighborhood Walmart. The concern should be an explosion of large digital or non-digital billboards in this area. This is a highly congested area that needs no more visual distractions by San Angelo's notoriously distracted or bad drivers. I'm certainly one of those. And digital billboards are designed to catch your attention. Let's keep Knickerbocker clear and put it in the area where they're prohibited. Another is Section 12.04.006, Section Section 3E, the last sentence, where the petition by property owners within 500 feet it's according to code compliance, and to me, this does not give residents the ability to have more exemptions within these codes. And as was said earlier, the dimming is only 100 feet. Well, if you live in a residential district that is, say, 600 to 700 feet, that sign is still pretty bright. And so we would ask that the dimming take place in an area further than 100 feet. Also, there is a 500-foot restriction about where these signs are, or neighbors and, okay, thank you.
Finish that sentence.
Well, my concern was that I feel like that the surrounding businesses and residential areas especially need to extend into that, because 150 feet is not very big. And you could literally go like concentric farming, 150 feet, 150 feet, 150 feet, 150 feet.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you all very much.
Oh, I guess, Luke, you should be saying that, not me. Sorry.
That concludes public comment.
So could you expand a little bit on what Mr. Martinez mentioned about, we've got an 8-second hold discussing video animation?
Yes, and that came up at the last town hall meeting, and we've had a discussion and was looking for a definition that we could include in there that would meet what they were looking for. We have not been able to find the right one, so I think staff would be willing to work with Mr. Martinez and get something in the ordinance between now and the next reading to allow for that type of animation. It's really kind of a scrolling animation that you would see that student A is on a roll and that kind of thing that you would see on those electronic message boards, where it talks about that if you've got an image. It should stay there for a certain period of time and should then move quicker than 2 seconds. It shouldn't drag across. And so I think we can look at that and come up with a definition and make that amendment between now and the next reading.
I need to close public comment. So if there any other discussion or a motion?
I have a question about the temporary signs. So, like a nail salon that has the banner that's across the top. By changing this, is that making every single one of them have to go and buy and invest, or are they?
No, we're not changing any of that language as of right now. That's for future discussion to see how that, how those banner signs that are attached to a structure, should we change that in any way or not? We are not changing that through this amendment today.
Okay.
I think, to expand on that a little bit, at least as far as what I know, there is some overlap between what you could consider to be a portable sign and a temporary sign. One of them, there is a fee, a permit fee, and the other one there's not. And so those need to be just better defined, and I think that's what, Aaron's
Correct.
proposing here, is that be further developed and defined in the code.
Yeah, and just like Mr. Martinez says, how do we make a level playing field for all, and so that everybody's following the same rules and not penalizing one group over another? And so we just need to really look at that. As y'all know, the sign ordinance is a big document. It's 18 pages or so, and lots of its definitions, and it's been added to over the years, and so I think it really needs the right amount of time. What we're doing today is solving that moratorium, which we had 6 months to solve, and get a billboard definition, and I think that's what we're moving forward with.
Having sat on the committee for the sign ordinance, I understand most of it pretty well. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the sign ordinance and amending section 420 of the zoning ordinance, and with the continued discussion of portable signs, temporary signs, and sign permit fees at another time.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Okay, I guess that's us.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, once again, we are considering following the Planning Commission 7-0 vote in support of what has been presented on this sign ordinance. So I'm going to open it up for consideration from City Council. I'd like to know if you have further questions or comments to add to this motion. Larry?
Yes, ma'am, I do. And this is personal experience on flags. What about obscenities? As far as I can tell, it's First Amendment rights. Gone out and tried to get someone to take a sign down. I was asked to just leave the property, and the lawyers told me I can't do anything about it. So I'd like to know why have a flag portion of that if it's all-encompassing in whatever a person wants to put on it. I started off asking questions about back to blue, whether you could have that up there, and other so on. But Brandon was nice enough to tell me that you really have no restrictions on it whatsoever. Although we don't like it, I hate it, I'm not sure there's anything we can do about it.
One would be the placement, the second would be the verbiage. You know, my biggest, and this is kind of a statement, but it sort of supports what Susan Mertz said, and that is, you know, TxDOT consistently talks about safety, and we worry about cell phones, we worry about distractions as we drive. Well, very often signs are those very distractions that create accidents. And particularly when there's a lot of flashing language or changing pictures or distractions. And I know that TxDOT has certain rules and regulations. I know we have to follow state law. But I also know, I mean, we watch the television every night, or some people Facebook, whatever, and the number of accidents we have on a regular basis is all about distraction. And yet, as a business owner, I want the ability to promote my business and tell other people, hey, here I am, come in and visit me. But I don't want somebody reading my sign and then running into the back end of another car. So I get very concerned about signage and relativity to safety, and everybody reading, trying to, look at reading the sign versus going through the green light. It is a distraction. But I don't know that we can do anything about that. And then I'm also very protective of our neighborhoods, and I want to make sure that if you live in a neighborhood and you look out your front window, you don't want to see the flashing sign from a street 2 blocks up. And maybe part of that's height, maybe part of that is intensity of light. But it is concerning. But most importantly, I'm concerned about the safety and distraction driving. And we talk about it all the time. And on a daily basis, we have distraction driving. And a lot of it is reading signs left and right and in front of you or whatever. So that's just my comment. That's all. Yes.
Per your comment, Mayor, I found it very interesting, the suggestions and opinions offered by Susan Mertz. But pursuant to your most immediate comment, Brandon, does the state have guidelines governing dimming boundaries where a commercial area abuts a residential area?
There's nothing universal. We did look at other cities and what they had. Ours is at, I believe, 125 feet for distances and then 100 feet on the dimming. That's pretty standard with most of the other communities around. There are some communities that don't have that at all. And so we're at least getting started somewhere with our illumination and trying to get it to dim over time. Obviously, we do have in our nuisance code about light that goes past your property line, which is hard to measure and sometimes can be subjective, but that is an area that we have to continue to work on as a community and find things that are protecting our neighborhoods. And I think some of our major corridors are right by major neighborhoods, and that can be challenging when you have zoning that allows very high uses, and some of the lots are large, and so you may have multiple signs allowed. And if those are illuminated or electronic message, then there's going to be light spillover into a neighborhood area that's very close to those areas. So I think that comes down to some neighborhood planning, some corridor planning, where this amendment today really solves a short-term issue that we've been with off-site, on-site. But I think we still have some work to do with our sign ordinance to continue to improve it for our community.
So you're suggesting we can continue to discuss that?
Yes.
Going forward? Because for reference, 100 feet's not very far. How long is this room, for example? I mean,
it's probably close to 100 feet.
Right.
I would make that assumption.
So I think her concern is entirely justified.
Yes, ma'am.
Particularly if it's illuminated and it's flashing.
Yes.
You know what's also distracting is like one's at 25 feet, one's at 50 feet, and one's at 75 feet. They all can kind of come together at any given corner, right? Or looking down the highway.
Well, that's why we're changing the height based on the road classification. And so if you're thinking about an arterial, which Knickerbocker is an arterial. So the idea of a higher height is your speed is probably faster on that arterial, and then you can identify that sign further down the road. You're not waiting to see something that's lower and trying to stop quickly and turn in. Now, the challenge is how many properties do we have along there that have signs because how they're cut up and other things like that. And then if you're in a local or a collector street, that sign height should be lower because your speed limit should be lower, so you're slowing down looking for those signs so they don't become as distracting as they could be. Every driver is different. Every driver should pay attention to kind of what's going on, but we all.
Woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Woulda,
If I
shoulda,
run in the
coulda.
back of your car.
Yes. So that's always a challenge, but working with our operations department and working with TxDOT and even the sign industry, looking at some of the standards that some of the other cities have put together, we feel like we're in line with those standards right now.
Define the difference between Knickerbocker Road and Sherwood Way.
Well, they're both arterials under our master thoroughfare plan. Both are TxDOT controlled roads. One just happens to have a lot more lanes. I may go to, let me see if I can, excuse me just a second.
Are you sure we can't warm this facility up because it is so cold?
So here on this billboard map, you can see where just past Arden Road, past right about the Red Arroyo, Sherwood Way allows billboards through there out to the city limits. Where Knickerbocker Road, they're not allowed by right unless it matches one of the zoning districts that I mentioned of light commercial, and heavy manufacturing. There were some properties along here that had that. That's why you see some of the billboards around the railroad crossing over Knickerbocker. They had the right zoning, but it is not the right corridor to add billboards. So even going out towards the lake, it is not, unless the zoning is there, you wouldn't be allowed to add a billboard. Where on Loop 306 and the other purple areas, you could add a billboard no matter what the zoning is, as long as you meet the separation distances.
Thank you for the visual. So, based on your comment, Ms. Mertz's other concern was the corridor on Knickerbocker between Red Arroyo and the neighborhood Walmart. Can you merge those two things together? That's a little harder for me to understand.
Yes, so right in here is about where the Red Arroyo is, and the Arroyo Trail, and then going south towards the neighborhood Walmart that's here just south of, I think, maybe Southland. I could be wrong on the street. Valley View, thank you. That area right now is not allowed a billboard on a corridor if the zoning is a light manufactured zoning, a heavy manufactured zoning, office warehouse, or heavy commercial. It could allow a billboard based on the linear frontage. Many of those properties there are some that are CGCH, so that's a little concerning. Most of them are CG or other districts that are not allowing billboards.
Leary?
Yes, Mayor, I understand your position on flags, but I'd like to get a legal reading on this.
I didn't give a position on the flags.
Don't like them.
No, I didn't say that. No, that didn't come out of my mouth.
So on regulating the content of flags, anytime you're regulating content, you're subject to strict scrutiny under the case law. And in order to prevail over strict scrutiny, you have to have a very good reason to do that. And in most cases, the city can't justify a reason to regulate content like that. The whole reason we're here about the on-site, off-site, that was brought up by content-based restrictions because you're having to read the sign in order to regulate it. And that came down to actually allow that distinction, but we found in operating for the past 4 years that it's really worked out not having that, and we really needed to focus on billboards. So like the mayor was talking about, time, place, and manner restrictions, dimensional restrictions, those are all things you can regulate that don't go towards content, but if they're at varying heights, may distract drivers, those are the things you want to focus on regulating.
Lucy, please.
I just was thinking about this. I think the mayor had brought it up before with the Jolly Green. Are those still?
Those arms?
Yeah.
So those,
Go ahead.
those are called
still-
air-activated signs. They are still prohibited. We have not changed that.
They're prohibited.
They're prohibited. We
Because
see
I've seen some.
Yes, I have too. I know that our code people are working with some folks to
Okay.
change their habits. And they're also trying to find the people that, when they're up, and sometimes they're very smart and like, well, I'll put this up on Saturday.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Thank you
they
so
are working through it, and they're trying to do the best they can.
Thank you so much.
Where can those men with moving arms be located?
Outside the city limits. They are prohibited within the city currently, under the current ordinance that has been that way for many years.
So we think that's distracting,
Yes.
but other things not. Just asking. Or just saying.
Our current ordinance sees them that way. We did not touch that as of right now. I think that's possibly part of the discussion. Personally, I'm not a big fan of those types of signs because they tend to be very acutely odd and really do get people distracted, but as opposed to something that's scrolling across a static square or rectangle. But I think that is for future discussion, let's keep that discussion going.
What about if I'm a person and I have a costume on and my arms move and I'm walking? What is that?
So many of y'all know I can be very snarky. However,
So we've gone way away from what this particular
Yes,
item
sir.
is. I'd like to make a motion to support what the planning commission voted on 7-0.
I'll second that.
No, just 30 minutes ago. Motion and a second. Public comment. Any more? Done. Any other questions or comments from council on this issue? But I didn't get my statement answered, so just FYI. Let's take a vote. All those in favor of passing the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 6-0. That concludes our joint meeting with the Planning Commission. I thank you all for your time.
When
Your-
y'all want to do another one, guys?
They're all gonna resign
No, thank you
now.
for the questions, being here with us to help solve some issues. That's greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Luke, do you want to adjourn?
we need an official
Take
adjournment.
a motion to adjourn.
I don't think I adjourned mine, right?
Had several, so,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we
meeting is
start all
adjourned.
over again. So I need a motion for adjourning the city council meeting. There's a motion, there's a second. Is there a vote? Yes.
Yes.
If you'd like to
Yes.
adjourn. We're going to take another break. This will be 10 minutes.